So I want to take a couple more minutes just because folks are going to come in. They're probably going to be dropping in right at 9:30 for the start of Dr. Lodes's talk. For now, since I was typing an email while you all were telling each other about MLA next year, who here is going to be at MLA in person in 2026? Probably, let's say probably, since some people are still deciding. So some of us have various constraints, including all the budget cuts that have happened this past year, which we'll have the opportunity to talk about at the business meeting. So I'll just take the next minute, though you're probably familiar with the lay of the land in terms of the schedule. We'll be wrapping this up, meet and greet up shortly. We'll have the plenary session. We'll have a short break after that. Then we'll have a full paper session with 3 papers. Excuse me. We'll have a lunch break. And then after that will be the business meeting and the town hall. And we'll have the opportunity to trade stories about our experiences during this historic year for universities and libraries in terms of budget cuts. Hopefully there'll be some good news too, and talk about next year's meeting and some other topics. So for now, so here we're at 9:30. I want to take the opportunity to welcome you all here again and to introduce Dr. Benedikt Lodes. He's going to be giving the plenary talk, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about him, which of course is information I got directly from him, and then he'll have the chance to introduce himself. So Dr. Lodes was born near Vienna and grew up in the countryside of northwestern Austria, where he sang in a boys' choir in a rural monastery, something I doubt any of us here have had an experience with, so we may need to ask him some questions about that. After completing his secondary education, he studied musicology at the University of Vienna and received a doctorate in 2012 with a dissertation on the genesis of the second movement of Beethoven's Sixth Symphony. In 2009, he became the head of the musicology library at the University Library of Vienna and completed his education in library and information studies in 2011. He's been the director of the Department of Music of the Austrian National Library since 2021, and he's currently a visiting researcher at the Stanford University Libraries. We're absolutely thrilled, delighted, and honored that he's agreed to share with us today to present at our plenary session with a presentation titled The Department of Music of the Austrian National Library, History, Collections, and Functions. And I hope you will all join me in giving a warm Zoom welcome to Dr. Benedikt Lodes.
Thank you so much, Tamar. Thank you, everybody. I'm also excited to be here. We are spending a year here in Stanford with the family, actually because my wife is here and we just accompanied her. I'm on leave right now in Vienna, and I'm spending my year here close to the music library of Stanford, and I'm having a really great time. It feels like a student life again. It's really like maybe the best year of my life, because it's like I have a lot of time. I can do what I love to, which is giving a presentation to you about the music department of the Austrian National Library. And yeah, I'm glad you're all here and interested in this topic. So I'll now try to share. I will share my screen. And you should now, in a few seconds, see my presentation. Okay. And I'm seeing my presenter notes, and yeah, off we start. Well, I figured I will tell you about the music department and was pondering what could interest you. And there is 1,000 ways to tell the story of our department, obviously. And I hope I found a good balance. Let me start out with some expectation management. This talk was 60 minutes long when I rehearsed it 12 hours ago. And since then, I've made considerable cuts. but didn't have the chance to rehearse it again. So I might go into some controlled overtime, but not too much, I think. And that's also due to 3 musical examples I want to play, and each one will be 3 to 5 minutes long, just to give you a chance to really dive into the music and also into the manuscript, which you will be following when I'm playing the music. And if there are remaining questions, there will be a time for a Q&A at the end of my presentation. My talk will loosely follow the thread of the department's historical development. And along the way, I will touch on several special collections and look more closely at 3 objects from different centuries. The Department of Music is part of the Austrian National Library, which has 2 main buildings. The Baroque Prunksaal, or State Hall, on the Josefsplatz, and the historicist New Hofburg, the Neue Hofburg, on Heldenplatz. You might know one of these buildings, which are staples of Viennese tourism. Neither of them houses the music collection, though. The music collection today is instead in the Palais Mollard in Herrengasse 9, where it moved in 2005. So Mary might have seen the music department at another place, in the Albertina, which we left in 2005, and we may be lucky and won't have to move the collection in the decades to come. This historic building has been thoroughly modernized on the inside. The rear half of it contains air-conditioned storage rooms for the music collection and spreads across 8 floors. And we hold all of our holdings on site and deliver them in the reading room within an hour, usually, but could within 5 minutes if necessary. So they're quite close. And we don't have open stacks. Apart from the reference library in the reading room, which is located in the historic front section you just saw. So the windows on the left in this picture go to Herrengasse. We also have in the belle etage of the building several rooms for events, for concerts, for example, and these rooms are also used by the Austrian National Library in general. So you could marry there if you like. Apart from the music department, the Austrian National Library has 7 other special collections, which you see on the organigram here: pictures and graphics, manuscripts and rare books, which holds a lot of music too, especially medieval and Renaissance music. Then maps and globes, literature, papyri, planned languages and Esperanto, and the archive of the Austrian Folk Song Institute. The origins of the Austrian National Library, and therefore also of today's music collection, lie in the Habsburg Court Library in Vienna. Since it was not established by a specific founding act, it does not have a defined founding date. We usually communicate 1386 as the year of our origin. In that year, the Gospel book, known as the Evangeliar des Johannes von Troppau, was commissioned by Emperor Frederick III. This is taken as a marker for the beginning of the Habsburgs' interest in books. It was only from the 16th century onwards, however, that the library organization emerged, which more closely resembles the current understanding of the term. And it was not until the 1720s that Karl VI succeeded in establishing a dedicated library hall, the Prunksaal or State Hall, which you have just seen from the outside on Josefsplatz. It contains a large part of the historical book collection of the Austrian National Library today, and these 200,000 books are still in use when paged. However, the Austrian National Library cooperated with Google as part of a public-private partnership, Austrian Books Online, so you can consult all of these books and 400,000 more online today. As was customary at the time, the library in the State Hall formed a Bibliotheca Universalis, bringing together all fields of knowledge in one place. It also included all works on music of the library. Around 1800, scholarly interests began to specialize, and this affected music in particular. It became fashionable and indeed something of a craze in noble circles to collect music from earlier periods, and the actors of the time were well aware that the court library held a considerable amount of it. In 1826, which we consider our kind of founding year, this long-standing awareness had practical consequences. In the spring of that year, Moritz von Dietrichstein became prefect of the court library. He was very close to the music culture of his time. Upon taking office, he arranged for the music-related holdings of the court library to be catalogued and placed in a separate location. These holdings were considerable, partly because the Viennese court under Ferdinand III, hundreds of years before, had purchased Philipp Eduard Fugger's library in 1655, which also contained parts of his music library. Among them the numerous 16th century music prints, including around 25 Petrucci editions. And you see one of the Petrucci prints cover above in leather with the coat of arms of the Fugger, as well as manuscripts from the Heigemeir scriptorium below, also with the coat of arms of the Fugger. Significant as they were, they only became one of the pillars of the music collection, because Dietrichstein took a second important step that continues to shape the collection to this day. During his time as a Hofmusikgraf, a Habsburg court official responsible of the court music affairs, a position he had held before his tenure at the library. During his time as a Hofmusikgraf, he had noticed that the archives of the court music chapel were in a deplorable state. Music manuscripts from the 17th and 18th centuries were, as he put it, stored just in a hole in the wall. Dietrichstein requested that they be gradually transferred to the court library, so that they could be made available to composers, musicians, and researchers. In his first few months in 1826, 44 volumes were transferred. We only know the number, and that they were folio-sized, presumably choir books. Only one volume is known by name, the opera Giugno Brutto, which was composed jointly by Antonio Caldara, Carlo Cesarini, and Alessandro Scarlatti. This opera was written for Emperor Joseph I, delivered in a magnificent volume in oblong folio, and never performed because of the emperor's unexpected death. The archives of the court orchestra also housed entire music collections of emperors, including that of Emperor Leopold I. One of the operas found in this collection is Il Pomodoro by Antonio Cesti. The story surrounding this opera sheds light on the role opera played at the court of Emperor Leopold I and on the types of interconnected artifacts it generated. You can read Il Pomodoro Festa Teatrale. Feste teatrali were operatic performances organized by the Habsburg court for representational purposes, often on the occasion of birthdays, name days, and especially weddings of members of the imperial family. The performance of Il Pomodoro was precisely such an event. It was originally commissioned for the wedding celebrations of Emperor Leopold and Margherita Teresa of Spain, and you can read it here, per l'augustissime nozze delle sacre Cesarie, and so on. This Festa Teatrale, it was intended to be like a bonanza of superlatives. Not only was it planned to last more than 8 hours and to impress with numerous stage machines, but Lodovico Ottavio Bornacini, the stage director, was also instructed to build an opera house for it. It was precisely because of delays in the construction of this first freestanding theater in Vienna that the opera's premiere did not take place as planned. It was only 2 years later, in 1668, that it was performed, divided over 2 afternoons on the occasion of the Empress's birthday. The representative aspect is also illustrated by the fact that it resulted in several editions of the libretto in 2 different formats, a pocket-sized octavo one and a more luxurious quarto one. Both contained engravings of the stage sets. Obviously, not only had the books to be typeset twice, but also the stage designs had to be engraved twice for the 2 different editions. Like the performances themselves, the libretti with their engravings articulated imperial glorification and displayed economic power. So Leopold, it was just bragging. Also in front of Louis XIV in French, they always were in kind of concurrence. The music collection of the Austrian National Library today holds 3 of these libretti, 2 copies in octavo and 1 in quarto, which you can see here. I don't have too many photos of objects with me here, but I was lucky to find that one. So I don't have to go only with scans. So you see that these engravings were foldouts in the libretti. Many of them have been cut out over the centuries, but this one is still intact. The most magnificent object preserved from this Festa Teatrale is a series of these prints that was hand-colored for the emperor. Thanks to their original colors, they convey a lasting impression of the 1668 production. These copperplate engravings were only discovered in the castle in the 1990s and were acquired to supplement the existing collection around the Pomodoro. Talking about the music, it is preserved in 4 volumes. The 3rd and 5th acts are lost. Like all of Leopold's music scores, they are bound in white parchment, calfskin, and bear a portrait of the emperor on the cover and his coat of arms on the back. Unlike the works of Lully, Cavalli, Handel, or Vivaldi, the music written for the Viennese court has hardly ever been revived and is therefore largely unknown. Yet some of this music is astonishingly beautiful, and the court attracted several of the preeminent Italian composers of the time, whose works only later fell into oblivion. As an example, I will now play the Sinfonia and parts of the Prologo of Il Pomodoro. The recording artists omitted all roles except one, the Allegory of the Glory of Austria. It spans quite a gamut of musical and rhetorical devices. You have to read across the pages. We start here. I especially love the ending. It's one consequence of a large, long-established collection like ours that, despite its often confusing scope, is that they naturally form extensive complexes around specific thematic areas, which in turn facilitate working with them. So, deliveries from the Kurt Music Chapel continued throughout the 19th and 20th century, including liturgical music, which, although it went out of fashion more slowly, was nevertheless eventually replaced by newer trends. You see here the Requiem by Florian Gassmann. Church music has generally been preserved with complete parts and scores, and performance dates were usually recorded as well, making it possible to understand the liturgical music practices of the time. You see the dates on the upper left corner. They're all from the late 18th century here. However, the Kurt Library also continuously acquired material from other sources than just the Kurt Chapel. Until 1850, enthusiastic music lovers were in charge of it, who were well connected in the musical world. These founders were also ideologically driven. Dietrich Stein and his colleagues considered German music superior. They represent the beginnings of a patriotic nationalism that already foreshadowed was to come. During their years, some very valuable manuscripts found their way into the music collection. Too many to list. They include Joseph Haydn's Nelson Mass and his Kaiserlied, the former Austrian and then German hymn, an anthem, Beethoven's Violin Concerto, his Quartetto Serioso, and of course the Requiem of Mozart, which you all know is a fragment because Mozart didn't finish it. This is the first page of it, as it was delivered to Count of Waldeck. Introit and Kyrie are mostly in Mozart's hand here, but not his signature here, which has been forged by Franz Xaver Süßmayr. But the rest of what was delivered to the Count from the Dies Irae until the end of the work is in Süßmayer's hand. He had completed the missing parts and movements on behalf of Constanze Mozart, and this page is entirely Süßmayer. Süßmayer did not complete the missing sections in Mozart's own draft, though. Instead, he received Mozart's autograph just in order to copy it and completed the work in his own fair copy. The resulting manuscripts, Mozart's first two movements and Süßmayer's fair copy, we now call the Ablieferungspartitur, the delivery score of the Requiem. It was purchased by the court library in 1838. This now is what Mozart's actual working score looks like today, which forms the second volume of the manuscript. It's the so-called Arbeitspartitur, the working score, running from the Dies Irae to the Hostias. Not everything here is by Mozart, but nothing is by Süßmayer. The passages circled in pencil, here, I hope you can see my arrow, those passages were written by Joseph Eibler. Constanze had asked him first to complete the Requiem. However, he quit his work in the Lacrimosa at that point where he would have had to compose completely new music. The fact that Mozart was unable to complete the Requiem gives us an insight into his multi-stage working process. The choral setting is complete here. You have two voices only here, but it's complete. And we also find many dynamic markings and clear distinctions between solo and tutti. Intermittently, at critical points, there are hints of what is happening in the orchestra. As an example, I will play the Confutatis Maledictis, a recording of Christoph Spering, who recorded Mozart's fragments only, allows us to follow the action closely. Remember, also here there is more music in the manuscript than you will actually hear. Everything circled with pencil above is missing, because that's not Mozart's work, it's Eibler's. So this is where the manuscript ends. I'm always kind of moved by this. This is where the Moses manuscripts ends, and where Eibler tried to continue and just did quit then. As impressive as the development of the music collection was in the first half of the 19th century, it was equally meager in the second. The library's management had little to no interest in music. It was precisely during these decades that large parts of the Mozart and Beethoven estates came onto the market and, owing to Vienna's lack of interest, went to Berlin, ending up in the Prussian State Library. For this reason, Berlin holds today a far larger collection of Viennese classical music than Vienna itself. Speaking of estates, a new development set in at the end of the 19th century. The emerging tendency of composers to bequeath or even sell their manuscripts to libraries or archives. It's quite recent. The first and most important composer to bequeath his music in this way to the Austrian National Library, or Court Library at the time, was Anton Bruckner. In his 1893 will, he bequeathed his 15 major works to the Court Library. His 9 symphonies, although the 9th was never completed, his large choral orchestral works such as the Te Deum and Psalm 150, and his highly successful string quintet. What was initially only the nucleus of Bruckner's oeuvre has since grown into the largest Bruckner collection in the world. One of the main tasks connected with his legacy has always been Bruckner philology, and 2 of my predecessors as directors of the music department, Robert Haas and Leopold Nowak, contributed significantly to the complete edition of his works. For 100 years, Bruckner scholars have been grappling with what is known as the Bruckner problem. His students intervened repeatedly in the texts of his works, especially when editing them for publication. And it is not always possible to determine with certainty which changes Bruckner himself had authorized. This is compounded by the fact that Bruckner himself continued to revise and refine his early works throughout his life. The Adagio of the 7th Symphony is one of the typical situations in which his students, many of them conductors or pianists, advised him to cater more to the tastes and expectations of the audience. They considered its main climax complete only if marked by a cymbal crash. Bruckner followed the advice and added timpani, cymbal, and a triangle to the score at some point during rehearsals. You can see the inlay here. So this is just the added parts, mainly pauses or rests, and then, the crash here and here. This addition triggered discussions that even found their way into the manuscript itself. One person added the comment gilt, valid, and another person then added nicht, not. In the end, the idea was strongly promoted by some of Bruckner's students, but Bruckner himself agreed to it and implemented it. We will, as a last musical excursion, now listen to the whole segment, following the manuscript score as before. I would also like to draw your attention to the scraped areas on the paper in the trumpet and trombone sections. You will find them throughout. These relate to Bruckner's later decision to use Wagner tubas in the movement. He reassigned much of the content throughout the movement in order to commemorate Richard Wagner to the tubas, because Richard Wagner was on his deathbed while Bruckner was working on this movement, and Bruckner knew about that even before he actually died. Now the funeral chorale for Wagner sets in. This was, by the way, the last recording of Herbert von Karajan with the Viennese Philharmonic Orchestra in the Golden Hall of the Vienna Musikverein, so it won't get any more Viennese than this today. Bruckner's will dates 1893, and it was also not until this time that a head music librarian was appointed at the collection, and the collection gradually developed into a separate department, which was given its own premises in 1920, the Albertina. From 1920 onwards, it was also no longer part of a court library, but of a national library, which had emerged from it after the proclamation of the Republic following the First World War. The directors of the music department in the first half of the 20th century were clearly German nationalists during the fragile phase of state building in the newly founded and greatly diminished Republic of Austria. The cultivation of Bruckner's work was particularly marked by this perspective, with Bruckner presented as a proto-German composer. During the Nazi era, the National Library was not only an incidental beneficiary of expropriations. In the music department, these kind of acquisitions were also pursued out of conviction. This injustice was addressed only hesitantly after the Second World War, and it is only in the past 40 years that proper steps have been taken to, at least legally, remedy the situation. During the 20th century, the music collection grew massively. Since the 1950s, the acquisition of composers' papers has been a major factor in its development. Since 1970, it has acquired around 300 composers and music archives, in addition to its ongoing acquisition of individual items and smaller sets of materials. For example, in 1977, it received Alban Berg's archive as a donation from his widow, Helene. It is one of the most important and most extensively researched holdings in the music collection today. Today, the Austrian National Library is still a federal cultural institution, but legally independent in its operations and organizational structure. It receives substantial funding from the federal budget, around $31 million per year. Half of it goes to staff, but is also permitted to generate its own income, which amounts to about $7 million annually, mostly visitors to the State Hall. The Republic of Austria remains the owner of the collections. Overall, the library has around 330 full-time equivalent employees, 12 of whom work in the music department. So we are 12, and there is no professional training program for music librarians in Austria, not all of us have studied musicology and a librarian degree. In fact, my deputy and I happen to be the only ones, both with a degree in musicology and the completed librarian training. We also do not have fancy job titles in Austria. That's a US thing, but I can describe what staff is doing at the music department. It includes two colleagues who are trained librarians and have acquired their knowledge of music on the job. They are responsible for cataloging music prints. Books are not cataloged in the music department, but centrally. 4 additional staff members are musicologists and have been trained on the job to catalog music manuscripts and biographical materials. In addition, they perform other important tasks such as providing reference services in the reading room and by email, curating online exhibitions and digitization projects, designing exhibitions in the State Hall, writing blog posts, and collaborating with researchers. 5 staff members form the backbone of daily operations. They keep services running for users and staff, care for the stacks, carry out minor object repairs, and handle reproduction orders. Digital reproductions are an essential part of everyday work. In addition to serving reading room users who request between 15 and 20,000 items per year, we also process approximately 1,000 orders for digitized materials and other requests annually. Acquisition policies are based on publicly available guidelines and focus on research literature, music prints, and manuscripts related to Austria. The department also holds 6 chamber music concerts per year. These concerts generally feature contemporary music with the composers present, allowing us to stay connected to the contemporary music scene, which is vital for acquiring present-day music. In addition, the Austrian National Library holds legal deposit status, which means that all music prints and ephemera, unfortunately, published in Austria must be deposited with the music department. To conclude my talk, I would like to highlight those resources on our website that are most likely to be useful to you or your patrons. To begin with, the entire music collection can be searched online, provided it has already been catalogued. You don't depend on access to any physical catalog to research it. We hold around 60,000 music manuscripts, 130,000 music prints, 80,000 volumes of research literature, 8,000 librettos, and 25,000 recordings, and much more. All these numbers are to be taken with a considerable degree of approximation, but you get an idea. Reproductions can be ordered for any object directly from its catalog entry. It's like here among the links, it's only in German, but if you click on Reproduktionsanfrage stellen, you will get a form and then get in contact with my team. Additionally, in recent years, the content of all of our vaults, with our most precious manuscripts and prints, the music libraries of Emperor Leopold I, the whole music library of Emperor Charles VI, and old Beethoveniana and Bruckneriana have been digitized, and much more. You can find all of these scans in the catalog as well. All image data made available there is free to use without permission for everyone and in every context. We only ask to cite location and signature, or call sign. The books that have been scanned by Google can't be used for commercial purposes, though, for a set period of time. I think it's 10 years. Some of our recent digitization projects also have their own portal with proper finding aids. Bruckner Digital, Beethoven Digital, and the Bibliotheca Carolina Digital. If you are researching Austrian history or Austrian music history, Anno is also a very powerful portal. It's a portal of the Austrian National Library, and it contains 27 million pages of Austrian newspapers, and that also means in its historical boundaries, beginning in 1568 with the Fugger-Zeitungen. Most of the articles can be searched in full text, but they can also be browsed in various ways, most importantly by day of publication, obviously. So, and as music history did take place in Austria, especially for music history studies, that's extremely useful. And this is also the slide that brings me to the end of my presentation. I'm very glad to have had the opportunity to present the Austrian National Library's music collection to you and its department. And I invite you all to get in touch with me or the department anytime. We would love to share, this kind of human heritage with you. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Benedikt. That
Did
was
I make it in
absolutely
time? I
wonderful.
didn't let,
You
I didn't.
did.
Yeah, did I? Okay, thanks. So I'll
That
just
was
unshare my screen,
mhm,
I think. Yeah. Yeah.
what a
Welcome
treat.
back.
I'm feeling moved by the music I just
Really, I
heard.
was, yeah, I was moved too. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. That was just wonderful, such a treat, and hopefully will also spur some new connections for some of us with you, and
Yeah, that would be
maybe
great. And I will be in Salt Lake City. So with some of you, I might be able to meet in person, which I totally prefer to Zoom. Yeah.
that would be super. So I want to ask if anyone has any questions for Dr. Lodes, and I have one I wanted to kick off with myself because I'm
Mhm.
very curious about. I know that I'm not sure how true this is today, but I know maybe historically, maybe 10, 20 years ago, um, it was often harder, at least for American graduate students, to get access to archives in Europe than it was in the US. The US sort of had a reputation of being more open to all kinds of researchers, whereas you had to jump through a lot of hoops. And I don't know if
Mhm.
that's still the case in general, but I was wondering about for your collection, what the process is for a researcher to get access, physical, access on site.
We do as much as we can. My vision for the music department is we share the Austrian musical heritage. And sharing is really what everything is about. Cataloging is about sharing, digitizing is about sharing, also conserving is about sharing. Also, if it's like, we won't give you some stuff just to be able to share it in the future. So there are restrictions, but we are very liberal at the music department. We have vaults the vaults. Yeah, you can't use the materials in the vault without a research reason. But if you give us a reason, you can use it. If not, you would have to use the scans because there are scans now. But it's just the vaults are just like 8 vaults. We have so much stuff. All of the stuff I showed you, like the Carolina and all the music manuscripts, you can all just page them into the reading room and nobody asks questions. Yeah, it's just really about holographs, which are a bit more restricted. And I know that there are other kind of music departments and collections in Vienna that are way more restrictive and that kind of try to turn you away, but we don't. And it has been like this before. My predecessor was also very open and tried to yeah, to put as much power into the user as possible.
Well, that's good news and definitely something that those of us who are in contact with graduate students will pass along.
Yeah, sure. They may
Uh,
get in touch with me or with the service mail address I gave you. It's we are waiting for them. Yeah,
Wonderful.
yeah.
I wanted to ask if anyone else had a question. I see, Matthew, I see you put a comment in the chat. Do you want to share it directly?
Sure, I can. It is not a question, it's just a comment, which is why I just shared it in the chat. But I researched with you in person in summer 2016, and
Mhm.
you and your staff answered many questions and digitized things for me in advance of that. And since I also use Anno extensively, I just
Mhm.
want to share my appreciation for your
Thanks.
help. And I can share. I can read German a little bit, but I don't speak German. And your staff and you, I think, although 2016 was a long time ago, so I don't quite
Mhm.
remember, you were
Yeah.
incredibly helpful to me as a researcher that is not fluent in the language of the materials I was researching. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your comment. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks. It's good to hear. Yeah.
Thanks, Matthew. I see we have a question from the chat from Nick Patterson. Nick, do you want to hop on? Please go ahead and ask in person if you'd like.
Hi, thank you so much. And
Hello.
a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Um, this was a question I had just because you mentioned recordings, and I guess it would
Yeah.
apply to digital scores too. But
Hmm.
there's such a trend happening now away from physical recordings in terms of CDs and possibly scores also. I'm just curious about how the library might be engaging with that change and
Yeah.
whether you have strategies that you could share on that.
Yeah. I have a twofold answer. Around 15 years ago, we did lose the mandate to collect recordings at all. Yeah, they are now collected by another institution in Vienna. So this is we do hold these old recordings, and it's tapes and it's vinyl and all different types of material, but we do not collect them anymore. So we don't have to also think about like digital music anymore because it's not our problem. But what you're referring to, like digital scores, they are a huge problem for several reasons. Um, they are not like they don't have a value, a material value in itself. So it's hard to kind of find. You can't buy them in an auction house or something like that, but you receive it in huge amounts of data. Sometimes it didn't like start that much in our department yet, but it will come. And the literature archive has this kind of things like laptops and hard drives, and we are also, and I think everyone in the German speaking area is kind of figuring this out, and going different routes, with a long time preservation, digital rights management, which is mainly the biggest problem around emails and stuff like that. How do you handle that? How can you share emails in the future? We had quite some leeway with letters in the reading room, but with emails online, that's a hard thing to do. So we don't have answers. We have a lot of questions, but we don't have that many answers how to treat digital stuff.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
and thanks for the
Yeah,
wonderful
you're welcome.
presentation.
Yeah. So thank you.
Thanks so much for the question, Nick. Are there any other questions from, let's see, let me just go to the next screen just in case. If I don't see you and you have a question, please just unmute yourself just in case I miss you. But if not, oh, Ray, go ahead with your question. Thanks.
Yes, okay, I'll bite. Did your experience in the boys' choir set you on a path to having a life in music?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I decided to study musicology when I was a choir boy. It was a kind of it was an unusual decision in my kind of among my peers, but but I decided that there. I was for 9 years in a monastery. I started off as an alto, and at the end of high school I left as a baritone, and it was a boarding school. I went home only every other week, and we sang the mass every other week. So that's why I also chose the requiem, and I'm very much into vocal music, church music, which isn't kind of hyped nowadays, but I still love it. So
Did you get a chance to see did the monastery have any manuscripts? Did it have a library?
they've lost a lot of it. They do have a library, but I was too young to appreciate that.
I was just thinking, as
No, I
we're
wasn't
get,
born as a librarian, so just music.
well, as we were getting this marvelous experience of getting to follow along in from the manuscript with the recording,
Hmm.
I was thinking about how wonderful that would have been to get as a student, maybe not as a young, I
Hmm.
don't know if I would have appreciated it myself as a young person, but at least as a young musician. And
Hmm.
I was wondering if
Sure.
that might be slightly more common for folks who are based in Europe or
Yeah.
Germany.
And I know about, for example, about cellists who love to play the cello suites of Bach from the facsimile because it's so telling. His handwriting is so much more like natural, fluid than a print.
Any other questions from our membership here or from the folks who are joined us today? Okay, I have just one final one for you, Benedikt, and then it'll be time for us to wrap up, which is, could you share a little bit about how you choose, since you said there's been a kind of ongoing, continuous collecting. I think you mentioned 300 collections since 1970 or something like that, and you're holding concerts to make connections with new composers. How do you choose? Because there probably are more collections than you're able to acquire.
There are not so many more collections than we're able to acquire. And they kind of choose us. But it's also something that is always a kind of, we are in relationship to these composers. It's not this often that someone just pops up and is here with his like 20 boxes of music manuscripts. Maybe after the composer passed away, it may happen. We do have criteria, though, obviously. There is an Austrian music encyclopedia. And if there is a lemma on the person, it will be way more probable that it will go to the Austrian National Library. So it may happen that we kind of refer people to, for example, the Vienna City Library, if it's not a good fit with our collections. What I don't do is evaluating the music in itself on its own terms, because I don't feel able to. And I also think that even if I felt able to do that, it would be kind of a different perspective than maybe a person in 100 years would have on the same music. So I would kind of, rob the chance to evaluate the music from future generations. So I do appreciate some degree of, let's say, serendipity and randomness in the process. Because most definitely, music that I would kind of value very much will be formed like out of interest in 100 years as well. So there will be an average. Yeah.
Thank you so much. This has really been wonderful. It's time for us to wrap up, but what an amazing treat. Thank you so much for sharing all
Thank
this
you so
with
much
us.
for having me. It was really great to be with you today.
Looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Yeah.
For those of you who are able to stay, or maybe if we'll see each other at MLA or perhaps next year at Stanford. So for now, let's take a break for 15 minutes and we'll come back at 10:45 to hear Maristella Feustle's presentation on jazz history in Tijuana. So for now, thanks so much again, Benedikt.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks
We'll
all.
continue later on.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, folks. Welcome back. Welcome back and welcome to whoever has just joined us. Hi, Maristella. So welcome back to the annual meeting of the Music Library Association California chapter. We're in our paper session now. And our first paper is going to be delivered by Maristella Feustle, Music Special Collections Librarian at the University of North Texas. And her paper, which we're all looking forward to, is titled Tijuana Tangent, a New Orleans collection of oral histories uncovers jazz history in Tijuana. So please take it away, Maristella.
Thanks. I'll go ahead and share my screen and see if this if this works right. Let's see, are you able to see? Let's see, this isn't it quite yet. I will demonstrate the site, but I just need to share the right screen. Here we are. Okay, so let's see. Can you see the PowerPoint now? Excellent. And let's see. I'm going to go ahead and see, pop out my script over to another screen. And yeah, great to be with you today. I'm proud I got the time the time difference right. So to start, I'll briefly explain how this project came about and the milestones so far. In 2023 at the Texas chapter meeting, we looked at an alpha site for this project, and some of you may have been there. I introduced the beta site at this past year's online MLA conference. So back in 2021, Bruce Boyd Rayburn, the son of the band leader Boyd Rayburn at Tulane University's Hogan Jazz Archive, mentioned just in passing on an email discussion thread the existence of multiple binders that compiled every mention of places in their expansive jazz oral history project. That's a data set that just happened to be on paper. So I contacted him and then followed up with the Hogan Jazz Archive. They first sent me a sample to be sure that it was of interest, and yes, it certainly was. Given the amount of time and effort that went into assembling this data, it deserves to be taken to another level that realizes its potential to advance research in jazz history, and to honor the hidden labor that went into all of these sheets of paper by bringing it to a wider audience and realizing its potential in the present day as a data set. So on the right here is one page of that data set, the scanned binders describing the Alamo Dance Hall at Canal Street in Burgundy, 1001 Canal Street to be exact, as well as the interviewees, dates, and where to find the reference in the audio and transcriptions. So it's really good data. And as these dates show, the interviews themselves often go back into the 1950s and 60s, when many figures from the early years of jazz were still alive, so the primary source information is particularly rich. After paying for digitization and receiving the files, the next stage was transcribing each of these handwritten entries into a Google Sheets file, because we all know what trying to do OCR would do. And it's still very much the case that making things machine readable or machine intelligible still takes a lot of human intervention. So then came the fun part, the research. Finding street addresses for as many of these as possible, and that process is still ongoing. It's a great way to pass time in waiting in airports, on planes, multitasking on holiday visits to Ohio while watching mom TV shows with mom, and so on, but also when covering the reading room desk and making use of those last 5 minutes before a meeting. The $100 or so that I paid to have the binders scanned has had a return on investment well beyond anything I could have hoped for. For just a sample of the rest of the project that did center around New Orleans, here is a set of corroborating sources. We have stained glass from Lulu White's place, the Sanborn fire insurance map showing her place on Basin Street, and a listing from Rose's 1974 book Storyville that's also produced for reference in the Tulane binders. Even here, there's some ambiguity to work with. Mahogany Hall, shown in the position of 235 Basin on Rose's map, belongs to Lulu White, though Rose also gives her the rest of the corner with Property 12. And that's Property 12 on the faint photocopy in the upper right corner. So it's gratifying, even for well-known and well-documented venues, to place them in their geographical context and find evidence that makes their historical presence more tangible. For others, innumerable side quests await, and looking for a street address can bring out surprising details with it. So here is a link that, let's see, I'll go ahead and drop in the chat, and if there's time, I'll demonstrate this as well. But there's a screen capture of all of the locations that are plotted in Google Maps, and then a close-up on New Orleans itself, where you can see over the course of numerous decades, and their oral history is going into the early 1990s, so easily 100 years worth of venue locations that are plotted in the project. So let's see. So it'll pop over. Yeah, this will just popping over to the next slide. And so here are three such cases of things that have come out in the process of just looking for locations. One is the existence, that was new to me at least, of a proto-Storyville called Anderson County, after Tom Anderson of Storyville fame, memorialized in one of the early blue books that told readers who and where to call for a good time in New Orleans. Another, which led to an entire book being written, started when I emailed the public library of Rapide Parish in Louisiana, inquiring about a red light district in the early 1900s that the local paper referred to, but carefully avoided giving too many details about, keeping it on an if you know basis. The library referred the question to a local historian, Michael Wynn, who was surprised and intrigued by this revelation, hence the book in the center. The search for locations also uncovers tragedies and incidents of racist violence, such as the burning of the Wolves Forest Resort in 1921, not long after the Tulsa Race Massacre. A venue in Tulsa's own Greenwood district also appears in this data set, showing some of the geographical extent of early jazz musicians' travels. And that geographical extent included a seemingly improbable but prolonged and complex presence of jazz in Tijuana. Jazz in the early 1920s Tijuana naturally had close connections to the music scene of San Diego, which was only about 17 miles away, but also to those of Los Angeles and San Francisco. And these scenes existed in the aftermath of the closure of Storyville in New Orleans and the onset of Prohibition. Those developments in the United States intersected with political and economic events in Mexico, including the building of a racetrack for horse racing, and therefore betting on horse races in 1916, and evolving investment and infrastructure in the Mexican state of Baja California. And here's a particularly good quote from Gerald Horne's book about African Americans and the Mexican Revolution, talking about the place in history the place in jazz history that Baja California deserves. So outside of this data set from Tulane, the best known episode of Tijuana's role in jazz history is that of Jelly Roll Morton's appearances there, primarily over a few months in, I believe, late 1922. And Morton's time there helps preserve the names of the Kansas City and Newport bars in public memory, particularly in Morton's tune, The Kansas City Stomp, which was named not after Kansas City, Missouri, but after this venue. And in the Tulane data set, the oral history of clarinetist and multi-instrumentalist Clem Raymond records his experiences with the Kansas City Bar and another venue, The Main Event. And from there, this side quest grew into a research project all of its own. So other literature that's been especially useful in placing these searches in context are Gerald Horne's Black and Brown, African Americans and the Mexican Revolution, the periodic columns in the Chicago Defender by columnist Billy Tucker, an oral history from Leonard Rotman, whose family operated concessions at Tijuana races, a pamphlet about Tijuana similar to the New Orleans Blue Books, but lacking in comparable detail on locations, and an extended article in the New York Times in the summer of 1920 that chronicled the economic boom that legal alcohol and gambling fueled in Tijuana. In digging into the history of Tijuana in the 1920s, one finds a strikingly frequent cycle of serious and even catastrophic fires, followed by rapid rebuilding. Inelastic demand for access to alcohol and sports betting imparted a remarkable resilience. It's not immediately clear what was insurable across national boundaries to insulate proprietors from the risk, but the Sanborn Fire Insurance Company did publish a fire insurance map of Tijuana in November of 1924. So in a side-by-side comparison of the Sanborn map and the aftermath of the fire of 1925, it's possible to see how detailed a reproduction the Sanborn map provided, as well as how densely structures were packed into the block along Tijuana's Main Street and its principal cross street, labeled as 2nd Street. And these are now Avenida Revolucion and Calle Benito Juarez. So the Sanborn map provides essential context for assembling the puzzle pieces of the of the individual venues. And you can see the shape here in the aerial photo on the left matches the angular city block in the upper left. And it looks like it was taken more or less from the vantage point of above the St. Francis Hotel, which is a really useful landmark that's actually labeled as such on the Sanborn map. And then diagonally across the street is a large curio shop that's become another excellent landmark for orienting other locations. Therefore, domestic events in the United States provide the lower boundary for our time frame with the closure of Storyville and the onset of Prohibition, while the fire of November 1923 that destroyed the Kansas City bar in the Newport provides the upper boundary, slightly stretched by an attempt to relaunch the Newport in early 1924. A recurring theme across the larger mapping project has been the variety of materials that provide leads on venue locations, including old matchbooks, restaurant menus, and newspaper crime reports, which were likelier than advertising to include street addresses. For Tijuana, the prevailing aesthetic of postcards in this time, which also served as advertising, provided a remarkable number of detailed images of the principal streets, showing the abundance of venues where one could go door to door to door to keep the party going, almost like trick-or-treating but for liquor and with jazz. Still, another recurring theme in this research has been how the value and purpose of information can change over time. As I said in MLA in March, when they said for a good time, they couldn't have imagined that the scope of that promise included library research 100-odd years later. But if you look closely at the lower right postcard, you can see that it captures a detailed artistic rendering of the Newport Bar on 2nd Street. And just to underscore again what a destination Tijuana was during Prohibition, there was this description from Leonard Rotman's oral history of again going from door to door and bar hopping up and down the main streets of Tijuana. So in addition to the extensive online collection of digitized Sanborn maps, the Library of Congress also provides panoramas of Tijuana around 1923 that provide essential ground truth for the postcards. The bottom photo captures the northern end of Main Street, Avenida Revolucion, while the upper photo captures the intersection of Main and 2nd Street. And when you enlarge the uncompressed TIFF version of the photo, and you know where to look, you can spot the Kansas City bar way down to the left, and then the Newport on the right, to the right of the Cafe Cardinal. So this slide shows various captures of the Newport bar that this research has assembled. And it's important to note, it's also interesting to note the similarity between the top center image and the postcard below it, which shows how real images translated into more colorful renderings. So there are some particular points like the car in the middle of the road, the electrical pole, the mountains in the distance that align rather strikingly between between those. Similarly, for the Kansas City bar, other images reinforce what is faintly visible in the panorama. Importantly, the Last Chance bar on the corner of Main and 3rd provides a reference for where the Kansas City bar, with its parallel translation of the Ciudad de Kansas, is situated in the block via a set of 3 photos from the California Digital Library. You can see in the upper left, that's the Last Chance bar, the Favorita, and the Kansas City bar in the smaller structure to the right of La Favorita. Locating the main event has proven more of a challenge. The photo on the upper right of the slide shows a large main event sign next to the Big Curio Shop, and that was its name, the Big Curio Shop, or Big Curio Store. Recalling the newspaper image from the fire of 1925, that block was flattened, but the Big Curio Store was rebuilt in the same place, and that building still stands today, now as a bank. And so there's an ad at the lower left from the 1920s, and then a circa 2023 capture from Google Street View of the same building today. So now it's a bank. So this would appear to wrap up the story of the main event. And the twist, though, was that Billy Tucker's column in the Chicago Defender notes in mid-1920 that the main event had rebranded as the Cardinal Cafe. And similarly, like you had with the Kansas City bar and the Ciudad de Kansas, there was some iterations of the Newport sign are also Puerto Nuevo. And so the Cafe Cardinal on the smaller sign here is the Cardinal Cafe. So lots of subject modifier inversions between the two the two languages. So the photographed Cardinal Cafe is next to the Newport on 2nd Street, not next to the Big Curio Shop on Main Street. And to further complicate matters, news reporting at this time, along with advertising, consistently doesn't concern itself with street numbers. For that matter, a close examination of the 1924 Sanborn map shows an inconsistent street numbering scheme with little continuity from block to block. And it's unclear whether that was introduced by Sanborn or if it reflected any reality on the ground, as photos from this time also don't show prominently displayed street numbers on storefronts. So there's one well-known photo of boxer Jack Johnson, briefly the proprietor of the main event, in front of the venue, and Getty Images provides a date of May 6, 1920. What we can see of the outside of the building, with vertical siding and a small square window above the sign, does not match with any photo yet uncovered of either the Cardinal Cafe next to Newport or the main event next to the Big Curio Shop. So the main event ends in a draw for now, but narrowing it down to 2 potential locations is certainly progress. So there are a few conjectures that are floating around in my mind right now. And one of them is whether the Cardinal Cafe moved to the bigger space, but still hoping to find more postcards and photos that might uncover that. So here again on the Sanborn map are the approximate locations plotted of these venues. Main event that we just looked at, if it was to the right of the Big Curio Shop, it was up here on the northern side of Second Street. The Cardinal Cafe, it wouldn't be far, and it would be easy for someone's memory to conflate these locations, especially because at one point there was a curio shop on to the right of the Cardinal Cafe, but in any case, the approximate locations, insofar as the Sanborn map lays out buildings, is about here for both the Newport and the Cardinal Cafe. And then the last chance bar is down here at the corner, and that gave us the Kansas City bar about 3 properties to the right. So so around here would have been the Kansas City bar. So it's immensely gratifying to track down these locations, but physical artifacts, either in archival collections or city geography, ultimately tell a human story. And the effort to surface information about locations has been useful for telling more complete stories and shedding light on other mysteries along the way. So one of them is that in discussing the Kansas City bar with Alan Lomax, Jelly Roll Morton tells the story of one of its owners, a millionaire named Jack Jones, who wound up facing 20 years in jail. In Phil Pastor's book Dead Man Blues, Pastor hears the name as Jack Lanes and notes he was a black man from Muskogee, Oklahoma, facing a murder charge. Jelly Roll Morton's tendency to mythologize is well known. The man claims to have invented jazz, but this seemed easier to fact-check than some of the other disputes. How many millionaire murder cases were there in Oklahoma at this time, anywhere near Muskogee? So digging around in newspapers.com quickly identified the case of a Xenophon Jones, and I've never heard it pronounced by someone who knows how to pronounce it, so I'm going with Xenophon for now. So that case fits the facts of what Jelly Roll Morton described. Here indeed is a black millionaire accused of murder. He disappeared before trial and forfeited bail, and sure enough, he turns up in Mexico after a while, running a saloon in Tijuana. Morton assumed Jones was still in jail at the time of his interview with Lomax, but Jones was pardoned in 1933. And so other major figures in our set of venues include Jack Johnson, of course, and Sylvester or Still Stewart. Johnson's time in Tijuana gets scarcely a minute of mention in the Ken Burns documentary on his life. And to be fair, there were some other things going on to talk about. Johnson had fled the U.S. to avoid being arrested and jailed under the Mann Act for having married a white woman. Newspapers around 1920 showed Jack Johnson in Mexico City and note he's dabbling in real estate. So by spring, Johnson appears in Tijuana and purchases the main event. News stories about Johnson from the first half of 1920 are an ongoing saga of will he, won't he surrender to return to the U.S. and serve a short sentence and get on with his life. News stories note that Jack Johnson was dissatisfied with the venue he had purchased, and I think the closure of racing season really put economic pressure on Johnson to not linger in Tijuana. And then, as Billy Tucker's column noted, it had rebranded as the Cardinal Cafe by midsummer. So ultimately, Mexico declared that Johnson was no longer welcome, and he had little choice but to surrender or to try to flee overseas again. So the other major figure in this set of venues is Still Stewart, and the chronology of his ownership of the Kansas City bar relative to Xenophon Jones' apparent involvement is unclear, though it's possible to trace Still Stewart's movements from Denver to Southern California to Tijuana. And Billy Tucker chronicled Stewart's effort to bring back a bigger, better 2-story Newport in February following the fire in November of 2023. It's Friday, 1923. And Stewart was also well known as an entrepreneur and advocate. Despite his efforts to rebuild, he eventually resurfaced in California working as a bail bondsman. And it's interesting to know that 2 other sources, the Rotten Oral History and the book Satan's Playground by Vanderwood, say Jack Johnson was also involved with the Newport. So that's a loose end that'll be interesting to investigate further. So I know I'm I'm short on time and want to make sure there's time for questions, but a few common threads in the stories that emerge here are avoiding U.S. jurisdiction, whether as a fugitive or tourist. There are also multiple intersections of jazz and boxing, and there's a story in Downbeat in the 30s that even Jelly Roll Morton briefly considered becoming a boxing promoter. But most basically, the pattern is that where the good times roll, whatever one's definition may be, good time music tends to follow. And also throughout history, gigs happen where there's cash flow for discretionary spending, and often a need to impress people, whether it's the royal court, a holiday party at the country club, or a quick escape from prohibition. So next steps for this project are definitely an article, continued work on the data set and the beta site, and at some point, I'll call it done and publicize the site more widely. But there's certainly the promise that more side quests await. And I have my contact information there, so I'll stop sharing and then pop over to the beta site. We have at least a couple minutes for questions.
Thanks so much, Maristella. So did you want us, that was just so cool the way you're bringing all this different types of information together from different sources. Did you want us to bring in some questions, or do you want to show us the site, which also looks like a great thing to learn more about?
Oh, if there are questions, I think I can multitask. There's a lot of prefatory information on the site, and then at the bottom is the actual interactive Google Maps where you can drop in and see, for instance, highway, the number of venues along Highway 90 that have been named in this data set.
It just seems like an amazingly rich data set that it's not just that the data set is rich, but that you've recognized the potential, which is just so cool.
Thanks. And the full data set, I think, was around 6,600 lines of data. So, and you can see it. Venues turn up in Houston, in Dallas, in Tulsa.
It seems like a great resource for future research as well, and jazz, and potential to kind of change the story or stories that we tell about jazz, especially in the West. It's wonderful.
Thanks. Yeah, and it's been a lot of fun, and it's turned up a lot of surprises.
So we have about 1 minute. Are there any questions from the audience for Maristella? I'm not sure how much you can tell us in 1 minute, Maristella, but could you briefly let us know the main challenge and the biggest surprise and the biggest challenge in this project?
Sure. I think the main surprise has been the variety of venues that it's not just jazz clubs and speakeasies, but especially in New Orleans, it's church halls, benevolent societies, schools, and just a broader cross section of musical life and where these musicians were working. The biggest challenge has really just been the labor intensiveness of the work, but then every time you find one, and only the tougher ones are left, but still every time you find one, it's definitely affirming and reinforcing to keep going.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I love the richness of the data and the fact that there's so many different sources that are kind of coming together in the individual node, which is the club or the venue, and then also reaching outward. So super interesting.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks so much. And thanks so much for having a Texas Texas chapter member to present.
Welcome. We're all in it together. So
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Maristella. We need to move on since we're doing back-to-back presentations. So we're going to move along to the next one in this session, which is going to be delivered by Ray Heigemeir, who's the public services librarian at the Stanford Music Library, also right across the wall from me on the other side of the wall that you can't see. And he's going to give a presentation titled Rare Music at Stanford, a final report on Stanford Library's Manuscripts Digitization project. So please take it away, Ray.
Okay, so now I just need to figure out how to share.
Give me one moment, I'll make you a co-host. Okay, you should be able to share now.
Oh, sorry. Let's see, how do I do that share again?
There should be a green button at the bottom of your screen that says share.
Let's see. Oh yeah, there we go. There, desktop one. Okay. Did that work?
It depends on what we're
Yes,
supposed to
you
be
can desktop.
seeing.
Oh, do you see a full screen of my my first slide?
There you go. We see it.
Yes? Okay. And you can hear me all right? Okay. Good. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I gave this presentation at the YAML meeting in Salzburg this last summer as a follow-up to a progress report I gave in 2022. And some of you have been following this project over the years, and I'm pleased to report that we've officially completed it. Officially, with an asterisk, there's always the next thing coming up, but we'll call it done for now. I'll describe the genesis of the project and how we carried it out, and then I'll follow up with some examples to give you a sense of the variety of materials included in the online exhibit, which are more than just manuscripts. Now, Stanford's premier rare music collection, the Memorial Library of Music, was presented to the university in 1950. While a print catalog was published, access to that collection and subsequent editions has long suffered from a form of benign neglect. The old print catalog was sort of adequate, public service staff did what they could to provide help, and it all struggled along for quite some time. In addition, musical score material, and in particular music manuscripts, were mostly filed away in a variety of good and not so good housing in various storage areas. At the time, it must have been acceptable practice, but continued use began taking a toll on the physical condition of many of the often fragile objects. And as an additional roadblock, there was no music specialist working directly with this material who might have kept a closer watch over the years. And to be specific, this is in Special Collections, which is housed in the main library, in Greene Library. Beginning in the early 2000s, a very small percentage of items began to appear in our online catalog, but the vast majority of materials continued to rely on discovery solely via the 1950 print catalog. In a review of the catalog published in Notes in 1951, Otto Albrecht reported finding over 170 errors contained in the 1200 catalog entries. And a few of those errors still linger 75 years later, right? I uncovered one fairly recently, but hopefully they'll be addressed as more items are added to the online catalog. The print catalog also reflects the particular tastes of the collector, George Keating, and the compiler, librarian Nathan Van Patten. Neither was trained in music, but that apparently was no deterrent to producing a catalog of rare music material. There are numerous well-known works in the collection. The original manuscript of Mascagni's Cavalleria Rusticana is one of the collection's touchstones, and perhaps rightly deserves the 5 pages in the catalog devoted to laudatory reviews of the premiere and subsequent performances, excerpted from Henry Kriebel's 1908 book, Chapters on Opera. It also transcribes Mascagni's remarks captured on the 50th anniversary recording of the opera by RCA, a full-page reproduction of a photograph of Gemma Bellincioni, the first Santuzza, and another full-page image of Emma Eames, who premiered the same role at the Metropolitan Opera. In my opinion, that is a lot of print real estate to devote to one work, but there it is. The manuscript of Friedrich von Flotow's Martha receives a page-and-a-half description, along with a full-page photo of Frida Hempel as Lady Harriet. Once wildly popular, I suspect few of us can hum a tune from it today. Also in the print catalog is the English translation of a letter by Richard Wagner to August Ruckel, which takes up a full 11 catalog pages. In contrast, the manuscript for Weber's Oberon is described in 5 lines, and Henry Cowell's manuscript for Ancient Desert Drones rates a mere 3 lines. Pardon me. In the years that followed publication of the catalog, rare music acquisitions were recorded in 2 typed lists of addenda, and the catalog plus the lists were photocopied to create a master use copy which lived in several large binders at the public service desk in the Special Collections Department. Keeping the binder up to date was a chore, and annotations ran somewhat wild, as you can see from this rather typical example of one of the lists of editions. Microfilm copies, shelving locations, additions, deletions, and corrections were all tracked in the single point of access. On this page, you can perhaps see the entry at the very top for a waltz by Jacques Offenbach. An added entry was also recorded in the catalog proper under the composer's name. And if you look very closely, you'll discover that this is an autographed manuscript. And if you listen very closely, you will likely hear a bibliographic cry for help. Projects proposing to manage the Memorial Library music collection date back to the 1970s, including a suggestion that the whole of it be microfilmed and offered for sale, accompanied by records in Arlen. Subsequent proposals to complete DCRM, or descriptive cataloging of rare music level cataloging, along with imaging, were deemed too expensive and too time-consuming and were discarded. As I thought about how to improve the situation with the resources I had at hand, I took inspiration from reports issued by the Library of Congress and other organizations that centered on the concept of hidden collections, which advocated for prioritizing unique materials and directing resources to aid in their discovery. Traditional approaches to cataloging were also called into question as the emerging digital landscape brought efficiencies to methods of discovery. In 2016, I began to consider metadata and digitization work that could be produced in-house at a pace that could be accommodated by our digital production lab and the Conservation Services Department. This resulted in a project proposal focused specifically on the manuscript materials in the Memorial Library of Music, plus manuscript items I might uncover in any other collections. The project goals were to locate, identify, and describe music score manuscripts and musicians' letters in the Memorial Library, as well as in our other special collections. To get images out to the public with just enough metadata to allow discovery and in an efficient and timely manner. To correct errors in the 1950 print catalog. To address preservation and conservation needs, including cleaning, repair, and proper housing. To encourage our students to engage with the materials, and to populate and promote a digital exhibit for easy access to those project materials. A small amount of digitized material already existed in the Stanford repository, including items produced for patron requests, along with some medieval objects managed by our rare book curator, and some print materials that I provided to the lab to test the new camera equipment, and about 90 items I had digitized from the Jenny Lind collection in advance of her bicentennial. I gathered these files in Spotlight, our online exhibit environment, to create a beachhead exhibit of about 200 items. Spotlight is an open source plugin to the Blacklight search engine, which uses Ruby on Rails and Apache Solr indices. And that is the extent of my technical knowledge. I'm happy to point anyone to more information on Spotlight. As everyone knows, a project isn't real until there's a spreadsheet involved. And so I then created a master spreadsheet of rare music titles from all available print resources. I also scoured Searchworks, our online catalog, and the Stanford Finding Aids in the Online Archive of California for any evidence of music materials, and in particular, anything that might be in manuscript form. Then the long process began of creating batches of items for tracking purposes, examining each item and confirming its identity, creating a basic catalog record or populating a mod spreadsheet where needed, flagging items for preservation review, and sending batches to the lab for digitization. Here you can see the Mozart Concerto for 3 keyboards, which is in Leopold Mozart's hand, with the solo and instrumental parts prepared for digitization with their barcoded tracking sheets. After the scanning was completed, we performed quality control checks, uploaded the images to Spotlight, and then populated exhibit-specific fields for composer, creator, and date in the exhibit. Little did I know that this would take 9 years to complete. As we remember, there were some disruptions, but I felt extremely fortunate to be able to work closely with these fascinating objects and to contribute to their well-being. And I think working with them contributed to my own well-being during those difficult times. The initial rare music exhibit provided a home for 284 items, including 135 manuscripts and 40 letters. Now, fast forward to spring 2025, and if I can get a drum roll in here somewhere. We added 1,100 items for a total of 1,307, including 628 manuscript scores, fragments, and sketches, and 540 musicians' letters. All objects are IIIF compatible and freely available worldwide for close viewing and download. Now, if you remember the Offenbach waltz, it's now ready for the 21st century and available both through the Spotlight exhibit and the library catalog. Digital access allows for continued engagement with researchers. Manuscripts have already filtered out to the world and now inform several recent critical editions, including Richard Strauss's Lieder, Faber's Oberon, Elgar's Enigma Variations, Mascagni's Cavalleria, of course, and Cherubini's Medea. The Spotlight exhibit includes nearly 30 essays written mostly by our doctoral students in musicology to tell the stories of items that caught their imagination. I'm hoping to continue this practice of writing articles for the library's news stream and linking them to the exhibit. And I invite interested authors from all institutions, all walks of life. I'm looking at you. If anyone's interested, let me know. You may also notice a section called Calling All Detectives, where we post items in need of further identification. Feel free to assist. The one thing I don't list here are the numerous letters for which we know only one correspondent, and I also welcome any information in that regard. In the course of my work, I found several significant items thought to be long missing, including letters by Constanze Mozart and Wagner. Here's the Mozart letter, which she writes to the composer Spontini about the sale of one of her husband's pianos. The letter had been transferred to the Memorial Library from another collection to be included in the 1950 print catalog. What I had discovered in my detective work was that while the catalog was updated, the actual object was never moved from the old collection box to the new one, and so was marked as missing for about 80 years. And just to mention an added benefit, the files in the digital repository also protects our intellectual content in case of loss, theft, or natural disaster. Future work will include manuscripts as they continue to surface from various collections and as new acquisitions. In the queue, and actually I learned on Friday that this is now in the lab, this very large and complex Mexican choir book containing the Liturgy of the Dead, which was created between 1600 and 1800. And here it is along with new PhD student or PhD graduate, Christina Kim, who centered her dissertation work on the item. There are several related scores from the Spanish missions, some misplaced in the Stanford Art Museum and still missing, but that's a mystery for another day. So now I'd like to show you a few items that have caught my attention over the years, just to give a sense of the variety of material that are included, the variety being the real strength of the collection. Here's one set of parts for Varèse's ionization, cobbled together from multiple copies of the score, and possibly used for the New York premiere in 1933. More research is needed before we scan them and make them available, but it's on the list. Here's one of 50 letters written by Henri Vieuxtemps, the violinist, to his wife Josephine. All are from various cities on his concert tours, and I have not so far found evidence that they are known to researchers. And actually, since I gave this presentation, was in contact with the people at the Vieuxtemps Archive, which is in Belgium, and they said that they hadn't known about these and were very pleased to be able to link out to them. So for Vieuxtemps, I think this is an opportunity to learn not only about him, but also to decipher firsthand accounts of concert life and travel in Europe in the mid-19th century. Also, I think he deserves some representation, some recognition for the most frugal use of a sheet of paper. So I always find this is really interesting, like how they could even read this, but I thought that was kind of fun. This anonymous work is a highlight of our show and tell sessions. It's heavily illustrated with scenes from the French Revolution. The composer and the country of origin are unknown. And it's listed in the Can You Help Us Identify section of the exhibit, if anyone who wants to have another look. Here we have a ladies' fan from Paris, 1785. The opening measures of one of Greatree's arias are printed on the reverse, and I recommend the excellent essay about this object, which was written by our former doctoral student, Michael Kinney. This is one of a number of early manuscript leaves that we continue to digitize. We're fortunate to have a variety of early leaves dating back to the 12th century, which are so useful for demonstrating to students the development of Western notation. And more Mozart. Here we have a fragment composed by Leopold Mozart. And in some older sources, this was said to be in Amadeus's hand. I'm fairly certain it's in Leopold's hand and would like to confirm that with a Mozart scholar. I've been looking for someone when I was in Salzburg. This sort of got a laugh when I asked if anybody who knew anything about Mozart, but hopefully we'll get some more information about it. Operntippen is a 6-volume set of opera cartoons presenting 56 operas with each story told in a concise 6 panels. I think these are fun. I recommend browsing through them, but be forewarned, some of the illustrations are what we might call not safe for work. There is a browsing section for engravings, photographs, and documents, including, for example, the Encomium Musicis, a collection of Flemish engravings depicting biblical scenes incorporating music making and period instruments. This panel depicts the inauguration of Jerusalem's walls by Nehemiah. It features a number of ancient brass instruments, including the cornu, seen in the left foreground. On the right-hand side, which I think is a little bit funny, You see a quartet of young singers trying their best to be heard in this like massive cacophony. This book was identified in a collection finding aid as an Aleut songbook. I reached out to a professor at the University of Fairbanks in Alaska who provided correct information. So it is likely Inupiaq, and they are perhaps Lutheran hymn texts. Continuing our world tour, this manuscript by Alexei Lvov is signed and dated 1833 on the cover page. This is the first formal anthem of the Russian Imperial Empire and was the result of a songwriting competition. As with so many items, I personally find it remarkable that this object has come to rest in Northern California. And here's an autographed quotation of Ravel's Bolero. And as many of you are aware, in 2025, we celebrate Ravel's 150th birthday. So feel free to forward this to any Ravel fans you may know. And finally, a few items have been scanned but can't be shared as they're still under copyright. One future task is to pursue permissions to be able to release additional manuscripts, such as this one. Bringing it home to Stanford, here's a page from one of Henry Cowell's manuscripts, which is the only original manuscript example of his tone cluster notation. Pardon me. Cowell had connections with Stanford and the local area, having been a subject in a now controversial university-sponsored study of gifted children. Cowell was raised in the woods near the present-day campus, and along with music, young Henry had an interest in botany and foraged for rare flowers, which he then sold at the local train station. And with that, I thank you for your time and attention. And I also want to specifically call out Kevin Kishimoto and Tyler Mitchell, who I believe are on the call today, for all of their help with this project over the years. So, questions? Anything I can answer?
Thanks so much, Ray. I have a question for you, but I want to just give everyone else another moment.
Okay.
This has been, this project was well underway when I arrived at Stanford 4.5 years ago, and it's been an education for me. Ray's been kind enough to sort of show me the process along the way, and I've benefited from getting to be here during the completion stages, but I know there's lots and lots, there's a big backstory to it. So thanks for the presentation, Ray. Thank you for all your work on this project, and also to the colleagues who you mentioned. I was wondering, you've done quite a bit of teaching with this collection, including one class in particular that maybe tends to have a surprise for the students. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about how you've taught with the collection, and if you wish, share that example that I'm referring to.
Sure. Each year I do a show and tell session for the three the undergraduate history sequences. And so we just finished one that was medieval materials, and we got to show specifically like the development of notation from, the 11th century up through the 16th century. And then the next covers from 1600 to 1830. And we get to show off our very fancy little Bach manuscript and Schubert and all the big names. And I have to say, I mean, we're just so fortunate to have this stuff here. I welcome anybody who wants to come to campus and see any of this in person. I just love showing it all off. I wish it was all mine. And then the third class is the more modern period, and we do have a few examples. I find that the students are really into Varese and Xenakis and the composers that use like mathematics in their scores. They're particularly wowed by all of that. And then I do have a freshman class that I meet with every year, and it's about it's a freshman writing class, and it's about musical deception. And the professor calls me in for a class meeting where I meet with them in special collections. And the premise is that if they're going to be writing so much about deceptive things, that maybe they would want to see some actual original manuscripts in person. So, as a sort of a counterpoint, it's like, how do you tell when something's real? Here, these are things that claim to be the real thing on paper, written by the composer in their own hand. Um, and then they ooh and ah over the famous things that they see. And then one of them, I come clean at the end, um, because it turns out it's actually a forgery of a leaf from Handel's Messiah. And then I get to tell the story about the forger and how he was from a famous forger from the 1920s who forged music manuscripts and letters by different scientists and George Washington and Christopher Columbus and Galileo, along with a number of music manuscripts. And what everyone gets a giggle about is the reason that he had done all this forgery was because he had to support his wife and his 7 mistresses. But anyway, he went back to Italy. He was in jail for a time and then started foraging for Mussolini's government.
Not a very auspicious second chapter
Yeah.
there. Thank you so much. I love that. I love hearing about this class as it developed, and I think it's fun and also helpful for folks just to hear about creative uses of manuscript collections and teaching, because we're often, those of us who are fortunate enough to have access to these collections are often called on to teach with them, and not all of us are experts, certainly not in every era or every style or genre. And so getting little tidbits from other people about the kinds of teaching they've done that have been successful, I think I find really helpful, and kind of just squirrel it away for perhaps using it or adapting it for my own context, given the opportunity.
Yeah, and I just want to invite everybody to look at rare music at Stanford. You can Google that and it'll come right up. That all of the things you find there can be downloaded in up to giant, TIFF files, so you can make poster size um, reproductions. And then hopefully maybe you'll find something to use in teaching or research or just things that you might find interesting.
Super. Thanks again so much, Ray. So fun to be along the ride for this project, and I'm glad we got a chance to hear about it here in the chapter. Looks like we have a couple of minutes
Thank you.
left. I wonder if do you want to drop the Rare Music at Stanford URL into the chat?
Oh,
And
sure.
so if folks want to take a look at it while the next person's getting set up, they can.
Sorry, let me
And
find it here.
last call for questions or comments for Ray.
Chat.
Super. Okay, so then you can click on that and explore to your heart's content. And that's also been building that site was, as any of you will know who've built a site like that, lots of problems to solve, given that these are music manuscripts and the catalog is kind of based on information about books. Super wonderful. Thanks so much, Ray. So let's move along to our third and final paper for this session, or rather presentation, I should say, because there's discussion built in. So the third presentation from our session is going to be delivered by Taylor Greene, who's the chair of Library AI Literacy and Instructional Services and the Performing Arts Librarian at Chapman University. And his presentation is titled 1 Year Later, Advancing AI Literacy in Performing Arts Librarianship. So Taylor, wherever you are on the screen, I don't see you, but please take it away.
All right. Thanks, Tamar. I always chuckle when anybody has to read my entire title out loud because it's so kind of ridiculously long and full of different things. Which sort of plays into the topic of my presentation today, actually. And let me see. Can you see my my slides okay here?
Yeah, we're seeing that. There we go.
Okay, great. And I'm gonna expand this so I can see you all too. Let's see if that's work. Because we're going to, this is gonna be much more informal. This is gonna be, I'll share some things about AI literacy and in performing arts instruction, and then I'm hoping that we'll have some discussion as well. I know it's a little hard to do that sometimes over Zoom, but we'll see how it goes. This is also, as it alludes to here in the title, 1 year later, because I presented on this topic last year at our MLA California chapter meeting, and this is just sort of an update, and then another chance to discuss how we're continuing to talk about AI literacy in our instruction and other music librarianship processes and things. And so let me click here. There we go. So our basically that's what we'll do. We'll reflect on progress since last year. Oh, I should say also, I know not all of you were in attendance last year, and if there's anything that I'm not going to cover kind of the same things exactly, so feel free to ask a question. Anything that I'm sort of skimming over, or more details on any of the things that we'll talk about, and we'll keep this conversational. So feel free to just pop in and ask a question or save it for later. Either one's okay. And yeah, I think that's good enough. We'll go to the next slide here. So in 2024, when I talked to this group, we were, at Chapman, still kind of in an early exploration period of AI literacy, especially into music information literacy. But I think just generally speaking, that's true. There's, I think, at any university, a lot of faculty and student curiosity and mixed with apprehension, and that has certainly not changed. But we've continued to see these things evolve in different ways at the same time. Our goals for AI literacy at that point were introducing ethical AI use, building confidence in critical evaluation, using AI tools or of AI tools, and to spark disciplinary conversations within different units on campus. So where we are at Chapman now, we're beginning to go towards institutionalization, meaning that, less of a sort of everyone's trying to figure it out on their own approach, and more of where we do have some coordinated efforts, which are things that are also on the slide, like we have now some task forces and committees specifically trying to address AI literacy in teaching and learning, research and advisory and governance. And we have a new provost who's kind of made this more of a priority to not just leave it to everyone's own, figuring out, but to actually have some policies. If those of you who are on or who are at Cal State campuses may be familiar with the Ithaca S+R cohort participation in an information literacy, I'm sorry, AI literacy survey project that's going on. And so Chapman's also involved in that project as well. Some of you, I know certainly the CSUs do, and some of your other universities probably have now campus facilitated access to generative AI tools. We have one that they're calling Panther AI, which is based on something called LibreChat. So it's a portal to a sort of walled garden version of ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and DeepSeek and things like that you can access through your Chapman credentials. And in the library, we have always been kind of at the forefront of AI literacy ever since it became a thing, and have continued to do workshops for students and faculty, and are participating in these task forces and committees and things that I discussed earlier. And one of the things that I oversee in my non-performing arts role, but is related to AI literacy or I guess, instructional services, other parts of my long title, as the first year foundations program, the library instruction and Canvas integration of information literacy. We've expanded how we talk about AI literacy in there. It's one of the only places in the sort of broad curriculum where students get have a place specifically to talk about AI literacy and to learn about it. And then obviously my title has changed, so it actually has library AI literacy in it now. So that's sort of the overall what Chapman's been doing. This is the Panther AI portal I mentioned. And we've been sort of updating things along the way, including our definition of AI literacy, using the Leo Low definition, which is, sort of not too different from what we've always discussed before, but it's nicely broad and succinct. AI literacy is the ability to understand, use, and think critically about AI technologies and their impact on society, ethics, and everyday life. It works pretty well. And then so in the performing arts, these are things that I've been up to with AI literacy over the past year since the last time I talked to this group. I teach a course, as some of you know, called Music Information Literacy. It's a 0-credit course that's required for music students. And I actually haven't changed much in that course since last time about how I've started talking to students about AI literacy and included it in how we do and how we talk about brainstorming and doing research questions and things like that. So you can see, as I've mentioned here, we continue to use it for brainstorming, keyword generation, critical evaluation, and I do emphasize that I let students use it in particular for certain assignments, and ask that they reflect on how they used it and tell me how they used it. And I find it's actually, I learn from the way that they report using these tools and also about their feelings about it and stuff, which has been very interesting. I didn't last year teach the graduate research methods course for music performers, but I'm going to be teaching that in spring and will be including more AI literacy components to that. Last time I taught it was a couple of years ago. And so we'll be looking at experiments using ChatGPT versus traditional reference tools and evaluating reliability, transparency, and creativity, and thinking about what it means to be doing music research, especially these are for performers. They're keyboard collaborative arts students. It's our only graduate program. And so framing music research for that particular group of students has a lot of interesting ways to think about it. And this is something we're going to talk about more. Oh, and this isn't a music topic now, but in my other I'm sure many of you like me are also liaisons to other performing arts programs. So I'm also a liaison for theater and dance. And I skipped over the BA. I'll come back to that. So in dance and theater, I've had some professors ask me to come in and talk about AI literacy specifically, or to include it in what we're already going to be discussing with how to do research and using the library databases and all those kinds of things we always discuss. I'm going to exit here real quick and just show an example from my theater guide. So this is, can you all see the theater guide here? Okay. Okay, great. Thanks, Tamar. So this is, this is what I use for the theater history first semester of that course sequence. So we talk about things related to their project and using subjects and databases and all those things, and then discuss AI literacy and and have a conversation about how students are using it and how they see that they might use it or don't want to use it. And we discuss, some of you may have read about the study at MIT about your brain on ChatGPT, about differences in how in brain function when using your own brain versus using artificial intelligence tools. And I'll leave it at that for now and go back to the slides. Oh, I gotta go back where I was now. Sorry about that. And for the BA thesis, I've been working with the BA students who are writing a thesis, who are not in performance majors. And one thing that I discussed with them was, I don't, in that class, don't typically talk about AI much, but in one case, when I was talking with the class about how to make sense when you have a ton of sources, we did talk about Notebook LM as a tool for sort of conversing with your sources using a RAG system, which had some interesting conversations. This is actually a conversation, a prompt that I use in AI literacy instruction in general, even though it's a music related prompt. That's just because that's my background, and I figured it's useful. Get that thing out of the way. There we go. And I use this to demonstrate, when you've already done some research on your own and are looking to use a generative AI tool to facilitate, to help you along in your research in ways that are productive and that don't just kind of shortcut your own research and thinking processes, and also to demonstrate, how to write an effective, although long prompt. So I give them the example that I'm a music student writing a thesis paper on Julian Bream's 1969 album, 20th Century Guitar, and talk about my argument that I already have, um, and then give some examples. I've already read a number of interviews in books on Bream, etc., and relating that to my research question. And then I'm looking to strengthen my research by exploring more ideas that add depth to my understanding. Please suggest some additional ideas to incorporate into my research. And I do have the link there if we can look at it if anybody's interested. But it's using this prompt, and this is using the ChatGPT 5.0 version that's through the Chapman Panther AI portal. It gives me a bunch of other terms and ways to think about this topic that I could then go explore and find sources on it, things like that, rather than just asking for an answer to the research question. And then I think this is my last slide before we have some questions to discuss amongst ourselves. This is actually, I think, it's the same slide I used last year, which is just how I incorporated discussing ChatGPT or generative AI into one of my modules about doing research that's in my music information literacy course. All right, so I have some questions here. Hopefully some of you feel like talking. I know it's lunchtime and we've all been listening to some really interesting things for a while. But I'd like to know if anybody would like to share, first of all, what the position or policy is of your institution on generative AI. I'll just briefly tell you ours is moving towards a sort of default position of allowing students to use it, but letting faculty set limits on that or even ban it in their classes. But in an absence of faculty doing so in their courses, allowing students to use generative AI, which I'm not sure that's going to play out, but yeah, go ahead, Casey.
Yeah, so at my institution, AI is rapidly becoming more integrated in classes. In our audio engineering department, they're actually introducing generative AI, a generative AI course for music, which of course has its own, I've introduced some questions, comments, concerns for how they're going to introduce AI and sort of its permissive structure for its use in other classes. And I also sent that MIT article to the head of the audio engineering department to say this needs to be included when we're introducing people. But generative AI is also being introduced in our online programs as well for generating ways for beyond discussion questions for online students to have a more interactive experience. So it can generate things like crossword puzzles or quizzes and like random quiz questions based on pre-recorded videos that have to be answered before students can move on, and things like that. I'm still fairly hesitant about AI's use specifically in music performance, though that does seem to be fairly common, and that it seems to just kind of be growing more towards that direction.
Yeah, thank you, Casey. Yeah, so it sounds like at your institution they're embracing generative AI, and is that including the programs that generate music, not just, text and things like that, but things like Suno AI or anything like that?
Yeah, so I think that they're still working on developing the course on AI and music generation. But I think specifically in the audio engineering department, I think they're looking at um, using AI as a supportive software for things like audio editing. And I don't know in terms of pure generation how they're going to be looking at it, and it's not integrated currently, or not. There's no plan on integrating it in performance, but it's not being used for, or it hasn't been integrated in some of the research spaces yet. But I assume that that is something that they're going to be looking towards, and I'm planning on updating my own information literacy course to also start to include AI and pros and cons of using it in research, and how it should be used, how it shouldn't be used. Because I think that's sort of the line that a lot of people are having trouble distinguishing.
Yeah, yep, exactly. Yeah. Thank you, Casey. Anybody else want to share about their own institutions, about if they're sort of taking a different position on allowing or disallowing use of generative AI? Yeah, go ahead, Tamar.
Yeah, I think that Stanford's position overall is similar to what you outlined, Taylor, in kind of an embrace, and at the same time giving faculty the freedom to set their own boundaries and kind of engage students in conversations around the ethics at their own discretion. So one thing I would be really interested in hearing about, either whether today or just down the road, is the way, again, folks are able to incorporate conversations around AI into teaching about music research. And it's sort of just an extension of what we normally do, since so many reference sources in music are not digitized or available digitally. And if anyone's had the opportunity to kind of demonstrate that in an effective way to students, or if you've seen it demonstrated, just with particular examples of particular reference sources, that would be super. It might not be something that comes to mind right at the moment, but I think it would be nice to just exchange information about that along the way, since it seems like an effective way to demonstrate to students the strengths and limitations of AI for their own kind of music research projects.
Yeah, yeah. One of the problems with that is that the tools themselves change so often that it's, like a year ago, I would have had more examples of, made up citations and hallucinations and things, but like ChatGPT 5.1 just came out this week, and already is seeming like it has fewer of those things, and already had been before that with the later versions. But it still happens. I'm sure that I'm not the only one who's received questions from faculty and students asking me to, I can't find this source anywhere, and it turns out it's not a real source because it's just been, it's created by ChatGPT or something. One thing that's, I think, very different about the performing arts versus especially, like STEM fields, is that there are certain tools that use publicly available or open access sources, things like, Research Rabbit, or what's the one I heard about yesterday? Anyway, but these sort of research AI tools that kind of make your literature review for you, that maybe thankfully don't really work well for music yet, because on the one hand, it'd be nice if we had more open access music journals, but on the other hand, these tools are currently at least not really replacing doing actual literature review using databases all that well. See, Casey has a comment. An AI that focuses on looking through finding aids of archival institutions and libraries would be a really interesting development for that kind of research, assuming it could be limited to real sources. Yeah, that would be an interesting thing. I wonder if it's I wonder if it, you could create something like a RAG system where you load, those sort of sources into it and be able to ask questions from it. I'm not sure how, yeah, maybe for OCLC. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next question, if that's okay. What has changed in the past year, or what has surprised you by staying the same since, roughly a year ago in terms of AI and instruction or AI and students' use or anything like that? I'll go ahead and start with one thing that I've been surprised that has stayed the same is actually with faculty. Two things. On one hand, continually to focus on AI detection tools as sort of like the main thing that they're interested in learning more about, because they've never been good and continue to not be very good, those AI detection tools. And it's sort of maybe goes hand in hand with the other thing I've seen, which hasn't, in many cases has changed, but some people still are hesitant to change their assignments to, deal to sort of recognize the fact that students, I think like take-home essays are just fundamentally different now than they were a few years ago in terms of what you're going to expect from students who are probably already using generative AI. And some faculty just, leave it at don't use it and here's the assignment, but I think it's much more effective to try and figure out ways to reckon with the ways students are probably going to use it, or to try and introduce better ways to use it in the first place. Anybody else have any examples, whether it's teaching or research focused or something else? Yeah, go ahead, Casey.
I think one thing that I've noticed has been kind of the same from last year is more in the professional spaces that people tend to be very hesitant towards the use of AI or have almost a revulsion towards the use of AI. I think that like I've seen a lot of one thing that I enjoy in my personal life is listening to podcasts of like reading Reddit and reacting to Reddit stories. And there have been multiple Reddit stories in the last year of people using AI for personal reasons. There was one story of a man who used AI to write his wedding vows, and his wife left him at the altar as a result of that because she could immediately tell that it was AI. So it's interesting that faculty are really honed in on detection still, whereas I feel like a lot of people have picked up on, especially in generating text, they picked up on a lot of the hallmarks of AI generated text and can sort of tell the difference between someone who has used AI versus not. So that will be really interesting in terms of um, I guess the tone of voice for people as they use AI more, and how that will affect syntax in writing as well. But it's interesting to see that there are a lot of people who, in their personal lives, continue to be very hesitant towards the use of AI, but then others who fully embrace it right away. So that's just something that I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, that's true. And I found that quite a few of the performing arts students in particular seem hesitant to use generative AI, which I think, and also anybody who's in a kind of creative field, I think, sees the dangers of it, of being able to generate content rather than human created content, which is understandable. Yeah, go ahead, Tamar. Oh, you're still muted.
Sorry, one thing that
No problem.
hasn't changed is the complexity of describing and cataloging music. cataloging just music metadata and also description, archival description. And I'm certain there are no AIs that are anywhere close to being able to do what humans can do. And I wonder whether in our lifetimes it will be that kind of capacity will be developed in AI, whether I don't know if it's feasible at all, and also whether there's kind of the impetus available to create something like that. But it certainly doesn't seem like we've reached the stage where AI can do everything. We're nowhere near that stage in terms of cataloging and description, which is reassuring in certain ways.
Yeah, still need human expertise and experience for many tasks that remain human. I see Ray mentioned that a music professor who forbids all devices and only allows paper and pencils only. I've heard several cases of Chapman professors also going back to blue books. That's one of the main methods that professors are using these days to try and get their students to actually complete their own work, which is, funny because nobody was using blue books for so long, and then now they're an important tool again. I think that would, in some ways, I think it's had varying degrees of success. It works well for some classes, and I think others, it's proven to have more challenges. Yeah, make hand muscles work again, right? It would be hard to write a whole essay in a blue book, even for me, I think, at this point. Oh, thanks. Let's see, Casey Mullen's current project trying to develop a music cataloging AI. Oh, great. Well, there you go, Tamar. Before I go into any other questions, does anybody else have their own question they'd like to ask or other point to raise? You just have a couple of minutes left anyway. Yeah, go ahead, Casey.
One other question that I had is the last year, something that has popped up has been generative videos. And I myself have been tricked on social media of thinking that some videos have been real when they're not. And I'm curious if you included audiovisual material in terms of showing students or trying to identify methods to identify when a video is AI or not. I fear that that is something that is going to become particularly prominent in the coming years as AI becomes more advanced in that space, especially like with Sora AI and people not being able to distinguish between fake and real videos.
Yeah, good question. So for me personally, I used to in classes that were not really music specific, but I used to talk about ways to detect deep fake videos, and I've stopped doing that as much with particular methods to do it because it's what you say today may or not be accurate tomorrow with how the tools advance. But from the way that I usually discuss AI with classes, or I guess maybe the reason that I'm usually there to discuss it with them is more about like making them aware of those kinds of things, and also sort of the dangers of doing so. But it's hard to kind of definitively point out here's how you can detect an AI video. I know there are certain videos where you can see it, and make and figure it out pretty quickly, and I think maybe also it's less of my area of expertise, and usually a little outside of what we're talking about, but it's an important thing because there's a lot of AI content out there, slop, as they say.
Well, thanks so much, Taylor. Very timely topic, and I'm sure it will continue to be in future years. So thanks for bringing us up to date and getting us thinking about these topics. It's time for us to have our lunch break, or to rather break for lunch. And anyone's welcome to attend the business meeting, which is going to be at 1:30. Hopefully all of our California chapters will be able to attend. We have a couple of matters of business that would be great to have a nice discussion about. And for those of you who aren't going to be back, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure, and hope to see you around either at MLA or another opportunity. So thanks, everyone, and see you or some of you back here at 1:30. Bargaining.
I don't know.
Hey, Casey, do you think, I wonder if we should record the business meeting? Maybe we should leave this off of the recording.
I typically in the past have recorded the business meeting and then left the town hall off of recording.
Okay.
So that people can feel free to speak freely.
Sure.
Just so that people in the California chapter who aren't able to be here can still view the meeting, and then the town hall can be based on minutes.
No problem. We can go ahead and do that.
Okay, I've resumed the recording at this point.
So we were just talking about the upcoming MLA meeting and the hotel rates that are published, and wondering if those are the rates that are going to stand, or
Yeah, it's still pretty early. Usually they do those about December. So usually you find those online, but I was just checking. I was like, oh.
Yeah, the regular hotel rates are kind of steep, but I think there would be some sort of a discount with the room block.
It's possible that it isn't, figured in there yet.
Yeah, it's just
because we're
that
still
we don't.
early.
Yeah, they haven't announced it, or they haven't released it for us.
Yeah. Yeah. So hopefully those aren't right.
Yeah, I also noticed that it looks like most of the rooms come with free breakfast,
Oh, wow.
and I don't know if that will hold for our conference. I hope so.
Yeah.
Because who doesn't love free breakfast?
well, it's you're paying for the breakfast, so hopefully you'll eat it.
Yeah.
That's how they get you, by saying it's free.
Right.
Okay, so it's 1:31. Maybe we can kind of get this show on the road. I know that we're all would be happy to have an early afternoon to get things done that haven't gotten our attention today. So maybe we can get started. Is there anyone here who wasn't at the earlier meet and greet where we introduced ourselves? Okay.
Possibly me.
Oh yeah, Terry, you weren't there. Sorry, I should have noticed that.
I was also not there.
So do you want to do a quick introduction?
What were we saying? Sorry.
Just where you work and what the institution is.
Okay. I am the lead for music and media services at California State University, Fresno, and I am currently serving as treasurer/secretary for this group.
And I'm Kate Gerhardt at University of Washington.
Okay, welcome, Kate. So maybe since Kate wasn't at our earlier meet and greet, just if things come up that you're commenting on during the business meeting, maybe you can just introduce yourself. So,
okay.
On the principle that, at a normal conference, everyone would be welcome to come to the chapter meeting. So I think the business meeting. So happy for anyone to join, and glad to have Kate here. And we'll see the conversation about potentially merging with Pacific Northwest maybe will sort of happen more in the town hall, but I put it on the business meeting agenda just because it seems like there may be some business aspects to it too, although
as well.
Great, excellent. Okay, so I just shared the business meeting agenda. Looks like most of you got it in the chat. So just to give it a really quick glance, we're going to get an update on the chapter's finances from Terry. And then I'll share some quick updates about various things, including the chapter archivist, planning for the next chair-elect and treasurer. Then there's an opportunity to talk about impacts of recent budget cuts, if any, on you and your institution. And that ties in with the next few discussion topics. about next year's meeting, potentially thinking about applying for a chapter grant from MLA, and again, potentially thinking through potentially merging with Pacific Northwest. So Terry, do you want to kick things off with an update on our numbers? And I'll go ahead and take notes. Anyone, especially if I'm talking, I'm not going to be very good at taking notes. So if anyone wants to hop in, Terry or Ray or Casey, and add some notes, please do. Terry, do you want to kick us off with an update as to the budget funds and membership numbers? Maybe Terry had to step away for a minute. Are you there, Terry? He was just here. Okay, we can come back to that.
No, sorry.
Oh, there you are. Okay, great.
This thing, my camera isn't working today, and it keeps putting me in mute when I don't ask to be in mute. So sorry. Okay, so our current balance is $8,969.15. And I had sent an email yesterday asking for an updated roster and numbers that was as current as possible, but I haven't heard back. So I don't have it. I was looking on the website, and the people that they on MLA National website, the people that are listed are not necessarily current members who have paid their dues. So I don't think those numbers are reliable. So I can give I can update the notes, or as soon as I hear back from Melissa, I can let you know, but I haven't heard back yet. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. These shared Google Docs are great for that. So moving along, just so everyone knows, our former chapter archivist, who I didn't know personally, but was at UCLA, Callie Holmes, has retired. So there's currently no archivist for the chapter. I just want to thank Matthew Vest for stepping in to do some archivist work on the finding aid when it was needed. And we're having some conversations about potentially finding someone else. No update on that yet, but hopefully there'll be an update to share before too long. Casey, go ahead.
I was just requesting if you could provide me with access to the doc so that I could take notes for you.
I shared it with anyone with a link should have access. Two people would like access. That's odd.
Yeah, it made me ask for access too.
Okay.
Everyone
that's
can
really
access it as a viewer, but I need edit access in order to take notes on it.
Okay, sorry about that.
No worries.
It did not ask me for access, so there you go.
Like I said, everyone can view it. It's just for editor access that I was requesting.
Okay, let me know if there's any other blips like that. Matthew.
So I thought I could add a bit of information to the archive position, if that's okay. Well, also I wasn't there earlier. I'm Matthew. I work at UCLA. So the collection is in offsite, what we used to call SRLF, but is now called SLFS. And it isn't restricted to use in a special collections environment. It is able to be recalled by anyone at a UC. So that's just kind of information to share. So if people are interested in the position, I don't think it should be limited to people that even work in a UC, because you should be able to recall it to any UC library, and hopefully, I mean, those are scattered around the state. Hopefully there would be one close enough if someone is interested in this position. But I also would be happy if anyone was interested to see about getting better access for them too. Scott's asking a good question that I don't know the answer to.
I also don't know the answer. I think that would probably be a question for the former chapter archivist, and it possibly might be, there are some MLACC history documents that are in the in the archives that might answer that question, but it's certainly something we can think about updating. I would think that my inclination would be to wait until we have a new archivist and let that person sort of navigate that. But it's
I
definitely
might
worth exploring.
I might have a detail that doesn't answer this, but when I was adding materials, I looked at all the materials that are currently there, and some of them were transferred to us from Maryland. And I wonder if they actually did a process at the not National Archives, but the National MLA National Archives, to send things to the branches at some point.
I think this would be a great thing for the new archivist to look into. So if any of you has a detective streak in you, Casey?
I would guess that they probably transferred the archives to the chapter so that they could be more easily updated, and so that the chapter archivist could add to the collection more easily rather than having to send it to the University of Maryland and have the MLA archivist add for every individual chapter, as that would probably require a lot more legwork than they were probably intending on signing up for. So that would be my guess. But again, something an archivist can look into.
That makes sense. And Casey, it's a little hard to hear you. I don't know if there's any adjustment you could make to your audio. I noticed sort of midway through the chapter meeting, something shifted and then,
So I'm
oh, there you
currently
go.
I'm currently working at the circulation desk now, so I have to be a little bit more quiet.
Oh, okay. So yes, it'll be interesting to get the answer to this question, and it's possible different chapters might do it differently. So TBD. Anything else on that? Okay, moving along, just so you know, the board, which is we're listed up at the top there, myself, Casey, and Terry, we will be meeting once after this meeting, and then we'll set up another meeting in 2026 to talk about the process for getting the next chair-elect in place and the treasurer as well, since Terry's term will be ending in 2026. So just keep your eyes open for that and think through what you might be interested in doing. Any thoughts on that? Okay, so moving along, thought it might be nice to just have a conversation about impacts, if any, of all of us who want to share about the recent budget cuts that came through for many, not all universities, colleges, libraries, and museums, etc. And that may or may not impact our decision about where to hold the next meeting. But I'll kick it off by saying that Stanford underwent a major budget cut last year. There were impacts on library staffing, and there were major impacts on the collections budget and very severe impacts on our travel budgets. And so it's definitely something we're still navigating. And if we were to hold the meeting at Stanford, we'd be the lucky ones because we're not traveling, but just acknowledging that this may be impacting all of us. So if anyone else wants to share, that would be great.
Oh.
Taylor, is that a hand or?
Yeah, I can go ahead and share.
Okay.
I think I did that on accident, sorry, but so my travel budget never was restored from the pandemic cuts, so I've been in this position for a while. But yeah, we were lucky that we haven't had any staffing cuts. I think actually for most of the university, not just the library, but lots of other things have been cut. Our collection budget is, pretty dismal. And but I think in terms of traveling, at least we're not like, I don't have money to go to MLA National, but I mean, unless I paid out of pocket, but I would still go to the, up north, or even the Pacific Northwest, if we decided to merge. I know it's a later topic, but because it's at least, I don't know, it's not as difficult as, a multi-day thing with a far travel across the country or thing.
Thanks, Taylor. Did anyone else see immediate impacts of budget cuts on your own? We've all kind of, I think, followed the bigger impacts, but on professional development budgets, on staffing, on collections. Matthew.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we have we've seen a tightening of budget, and we're also undergoing reorganization of the library, which at this point is not fully clear, but what is clear is that we're removing or we're not going to have subject liaisons, which means that we won't have music librarians. I don't know what I will be, but I do know that I will not be a music librarian.
Wow.
We have also been asked so basically if we want to go to a conference and it has a virtual option, we're asked to attend virtually over attending in person. And professional development funds have been reduced pretty significantly. We're not, at this point, we haven't lost collections funds, but that is also a part of the reorganization. So I don't think that there will be any such subject specialization contributing to selecting materials.
Matthew, that is a sea change. Has that happened at other UCs, or is this UC wide, as far as you know?
So I have heard that similar things have happened at UC San Diego. Please don't quote me on that, anyone. Also, I know that they hired, so everyone or some of you might remember that they posted a position that was like music collections and humanities was, they were like the lead for arts and humanities or something like that. And I know 27 positions were reduced at San Diego, and I believe this was one of them. So I don't believe they have a music collections person there.
So Matt, I wanted to ask you, but your library is not being consolidated into the main. You're still going to be where you are.
If I have no responsibility for doing anything related to music, I don't know what the difference is.
Yeah, but the collections would still be in the same place. They don't.
The current collections would theoretically be in place temporarily.
Oh God.
I mean, I'm not trying to be dramatic, but like there's not, yeah. Without specialization, how would we acquire things? How would we choose what we're deaccessioning? So on. Yeah, Taylor is asking about the space, and the space is here. We are the smallest library. I think one of the positive things about our space is that at this point, I don't think anyone would want it. It's because it is not a very good space. I think it's beautiful. You guys came to the conference last time. We've done a lot of work, I think, to make it look nice, but they couldn't easily turn it into a performance space or classroom space, that sort of thing. So I think it's not as under pressure. Scott, thanks. You may have things to add about UCSD or Riverside. I also heard something similar for Santa Cruz, but I don't know.
Yeah, Santa Cruz and Merced are both so small that they sort of have dissolved away from subject specialists, but that was a while ago, and that wasn't necessarily intentional because of budget cuts. That was just because they're smaller campuses.
Well, it's kind of two things at once. On the one hand, at smaller campuses or other kinds of contexts, there haven't been subject specialists maybe ever or for a while. So they've had to adapt or learned how to adapt. On the other hand, at places where subject specialists have a kind of history and legacy, it's a really, really major existential shift, and not one that there's much to celebrate about. I can't really think of anything positive about it. It's always nice to have a glass half full attitude. I mean, UCLA has such a vibrant music presence in general. It's kind of remarkable that that's happening in the libraries. Well, keep us posted, Matthew. Anybody else with news about budget impacts? Or, I mean, it's always nice to have good news. You know, if anyone's institution is just trundling along and doing what you were always doing, please share. That would be great to know. Or none of the above. Go ahead, Casey.
Well, I will say that at Musicians Institute, as I've mentioned, I'm currently working the circulation desk. That's because we cut our student staff in half in order to save funding. So our way of managing it while also trying to be decent to our staff is to decrease the number of staff, but keep them at the same hours, but instead replace some of the shift with salary workers like myself, or our reprographics coordinator, who was able to get an increase in hours like right before some of this happened, and so we're lucky for that. Also because he's working on some very important projects. But otherwise, most of our budgets were cut during the pandemic and have never returned to the pre-pandemic levels. So collection developments is pretty much almost gone, except for very specific faculty requests. Professional development is basically on request, and has to be approved. But there isn't like a fund or anything that we can tap into. And then, so it's pretty limited overall. I mean, MI is a much smaller institution and structured very differently from some of the others. So a lot of it is just sort of based on enrollment numbers, but we still have our enrollment numbers are going down as a result of federal funding cuts because a lot of students aren't able to get the funding that they need to attend. And that goes for veterans as well as students in low-income housing as well.
Thanks, Casey.
Yeah, my situation is a little different because I'm in a public library, but we have an art and music section, separate building for just art and music. But yeah, we've had year after year collection cuts. I'm lucky for MLA because our friends of the library give me a certain amount of money to attend, and they just, we only have 5 full-time staff here, so we have my boss, the art librarian, myself, and 2 circ people, and everybody else is part-time. So, but I will be able to attend Salt Lake at least. So they've continued with that. So.
Thanks, Blair. Anyone else? Okay, well, we haven't heard any good news yet. Maybe there's some percolating back there, but this definitely ties in with the question of whether to meet at Stanford next year. I feel like those of us who are at UCLA probably still have the great memories of being together and how energizing that was. And it was kind of a demonstration of the various different kinds of value that accrue from having a meeting in person to me. It was the social, professional, just stimulation, learning about another institution. It was all of them. So I would love to be able to hold it at Stanford, hold our next our 2026 chapter meeting at Stanford. We won't decide this right here, but it would be great to kind of take the temperature of those of us who are here and think maybe start talking through, do we want to, would we like to try to have annual meetings in person? Do we think that the virtual in-person cadence is useful? Just any thoughts on that would be very welcome. And it'll be, idiosyncratic, and we'll have to put it to a vote, but it would be great to just hear from folks who are here now. Yeah, Matthew.
I really appreciate the in-person chapter meeting. And one of my thoughts here is that I think if the national chapter is having a virtual meeting, we should really try to have an in-person chapter, because if we do have funding constraints, then we wouldn't be using funds to travel to the national that year. I also think that, so that was like kind of thought number one. Thought number two might be that we might do a cycle of some sort. So potentially 1 year in person, the next virtual. We might even, if we're really concerned about funding, we might do a 3-year cycle where it's in person 2 years, 1 year, 2 years virtual, something like that. Those are just some off the cuffs initial ideas.
Thank you. Who else has thoughts? Blair, go ahead.
I just wanted to comment, you were at Stanford last time we were there. That was really a great meeting, Ray. Really, we got to see the church and all the organs, and he introduced us to the collections and talked about changes, and that was really a great meeting. That was before the pandemic. So, and I think a lot of the people here weren't there. So, yeah, thank you, Ray, for that, even though it was in another lifetime. Before the pandemic.
Well, the organs are still there.
Yes, I remember your organist talked to us too.
Oh,
yes.
he's going will have retired by then.
Yeah,
I think.
yeah, no, that was wonderful. Yeah. Oh, I gotta lower my.
Anyone else? Well, let's say kind of an exercise, somewhat abstract exercise, but if we were to put it to a vote right now, you can abstain if you're not sure. But if we were to put it to a vote right now, how many would like to have the meeting at Stanford next year? I'm seeing, oh, my screen is getting blocked. Hold on. Actually, since it's hard to see over Zoom, I'm sorry, this is a bit awkward, but can you put your name in the chat? And we'll, if it's a yes. How about have us do a react? Oh, Matthew, I don't know what that is.
Hang on, let me create like a poll.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I'm not very up on all the Zoom stuff.
Just give me 2 seconds. Okay, I think it should be out now. Can you see it?
Casey, you are amazing. Okay, so how do we?
So far I'm seeing everybody saying.
I'm sorry, where do I vote? Yeses. How do I vote? Where is
it? So if you are a host or co-host, you won't get the pop-up.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So far of the 17 people here, 11 have voted yes, 0 have voted no,
and some
have abstained.
Okay.
So I will take note of that result.
Thank you. Okay, well, that's nice to know. I think that kind of segues into the next topic on our agenda, which has to do with, I mean, the chapter grants could be about anything, and it could be if you have an idea for a different type of chapter grant, that's great. The reason I put them up here, the reason I put it on the agenda, hold on, sorry. Is because I was looking at former chapter grants and I saw they're all different kinds, but one of another chapter a few years ago got matching funds from MLA to support travel. I think in that case it was to the MLA conference, but my feeling is that in our case, since California is already a really big territory, and if we're potentially adding Pacific Northwest, that makes it even bigger. So,
Okay. Yeah.
I was thinking there might be the potential to support members in even just traveling to our local chapter meeting. And we do have some funds, of course, in the chapter to do that. But just one thought I had on potentially how we could support each other in making it feasible to travel to a chapter meeting. Whether we did it once a year, every other year, and so forth. Yes, Taylor.
Just wanted to point out that we used to do this pretty regularly, where we'd have travel. I want to say it was travel primarily for staff or students or early career librarians, but I don't remember if that was specifically for that or that's just the people who ended up getting the grant typically. But I don't know when we sort of dropped off with that. Probably, I guess, just when we were no longer doing in-person conferences for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't that expensive since it's only, within the state, you can give a couple $100 and it makes a pretty big difference for somebody to be able to attend.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Let's see. I think it was Blair and then Ray.
Yeah, we used to, well, when I was chapter chair long ago, we gave chapter grants to national meetings. And I think there was a feeling on the board at the time that, that was the job of the Freeman grant. So, it'd be definitely something to talk with Bruce about if we're going to do that. But to a chapter meeting, I imagine they wouldn't have any issues with that, especially if we're covering Pacific Northwest too. But yeah, I remember there were some issues with the board on the time because I think the last time we did that was like 2010, 2012 to a national meeting. But yeah, I don't think there'd be any issue with to a chapter meeting. Because those can add up, especially if you're a student.
Thanks, Blair. Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, so in my recollection, the main challenge of the travel grant that we had was that the collective we kept forgetting to advertise it. So like every year the meeting would come around and people would say, oh yeah, didn't we have a chapter grant? I guess we should have sent something out about it in time. So just noting a little bit of history there.
Maybe in those days it was harder to set up like announcements and work calendars, and some of us might have resisted using.
Yeah, I would like to think that there was a technical blocker, but I think
Ray, do you remember the year or how much it was?
no, I think that I don't remember if it was a set amount. It might have been even something just like $200 or $300. And I also don't recall if it was restricted to any one person. I don't think it was restricted to students or newcomers or anything.
Oh, I see.
But
So
I don't remember really offhand.
okay.
I think we would need to consult old meeting notes in our archive.
Yeah, because I wasn't on the board when that was decided. So,
I know when I
but
was
that,
treasurer, I'm sorry, Blair.
go ahead.
When
Go
I was
ahead.
treasurer, oops, I muted myself. It was $200, and but I remember we gave out 2 grants one year. I think it was, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago or something. I don't think Anthony Sharp is on this call, but he was the last one I remember getting it. I don't know when that was, but that the last one when I was the treasurer anyway, which I don't know. My memory's not good enough to recall when that was exactly. But I do remember it was about $200.
Well, if it was $200 8 years ago, maybe if we talk about it, maybe we should up it a little bit since everything's gotten more expensive. But it makes sense that, I mean, I'm glad that there is a sort of history of this. It makes sense since it's a big state and people have different capacities for self-funding, getting travel funding or self-funding. So I really like the idea of pursuing this and using some of our monies to support travel. And if that would make a difference to the membership, if that would sort of decide in favor of more in-person meetings, I think that would be really meaningful. On the other hand, having this meeting virtual did allow some people from out of state to attend and present, and that's pretty cool too. So it's nice to keep the idea of a virtual meeting alive for those reasons. Any other thoughts on this particular topic, or anyone happened to have any ideas, whether you've been thinking about it for a long time or it's just popped into your mind just now, about a different kind of grant that the chapter could apply for in support of music librarianship, especially in the face of these, what we've just been talking about? If not right at the moment, it's always, those chapter grants do exist, so they can be applied for. Going once? Go ahead, Ray.
Oh, something that an idea that gets floated from time to time, which I think is often successful, is having funds to send someone to the California Library Association, which is primarily focused on public libraries, and offering like a workshop in music cataloging or music reference. So that I think that we had done that before with cataloging and it was successful. But it's just another idea.
Well, it certainly seems like there are going to be some more folks who are expected or required to do collection development in music. I mean, I guess we have to cross our fingers on that, or work with music materials in some way. So it makes sense that there would be interest in that. I think that's a great idea.
I just looked up my documents here. The last time, I think it was actually it was the Stanford one, which is 2019, I think. But that was not 8 years ago, so I was wrong. But anyway, it was $270 when we gave away the grant the last time I was treasurer. So nice.
Maybe it just depended on the person. Maybe the person submitted a budget that's what they
I
would
think
need.
that's what it was. Yeah, I think we asked for a budget. That's likely.
Okay, any thoughts from recent or current students on things that might be useful, little money or workshops or professional support that might be useful for students or early career folks?
Well, always money.
Always money, yeah, of course.
And just, I think, connection and like mentoring opportunities and opportunities to be in the same spaces and just to shake hands and kind of see everything, interact with people, and not, I'm finding, because a lot of us work so independently that like kind of breaking into it there's a lot of like, not like guesswork, but like just figuring it out the hard way. So like just like a lot of like mentorship or just offering connection and like maybe more informal kind of Zoom gatherings to kind of where we can all pick your brains about a certain topic or something like that.
Okay, super. I've heard back in the fabled old days, that there were in-person kind of gatherings, maybe for maybe when Northern and Southern California were different chapters. Ray, correct me if I'm wrong. Weren't there kind of get-togethers at a bar in San Francisco or something like that?
During the chapter meetings?
No,
Oh,
off sort of at a 6-month cadence or something like that. So the chapter meeting would happen in the fall, and weren't there social events? No?
I don't remember that. I do I mean, being the old person that I am, I do remember when we had chapter meetings twice a year. Right. I see a few nods. Yeah.
Yeah, that was easier when we were Southern and Northern California.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see how that would help with it. That would be nice from a social point of view.
Yeah. And then sometimes we meet at the national meeting and sometimes not. Sometimes we meet at a bar or something as a chapter. So, or for breakfast or something. So.
Well, in hard times, one finds solidarity, so, and strength and companionship. So maybe some of these hard times will bring us closer together. We'll need each other more. That's somewhat of a silverish lining. Okay. Any other news or announcements that anyone wants to share? Projects you finished recently, changes that you've had in your roles, challenges you're currently facing or recently overcame? Okay, well, that should cue the Pacific Northwest folks who we were emailing before the meeting, and they're facing some challenges with their numbers. And of course, California, we've had lots of our numbers have dwindled too because of the aforementioned challenges. And so maybe it's 10 after 2, so we're actually officially in the town hall. So maybe we could stop the recording at this point and kind of go into the town hall conversation. And Pacific Northwest